Hello, everybody, and welcome to year 9. Sort of. There were a few years we've missed and everything, but basically the 9th year that Chris Parker and I, Patrick Musilek, have been making these top 12 albums of the year lists. So, woohoo, Chris! We made it. Another year.
To year 9. I'm glad. I was confused because I thought this was year 10, but next year will be 10. And I was like, are we going to have to do our top 12 of the decade or whatever? And I mean, you could just take the first entry from each list and call it good.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Right, but it doesn't work that way.
No.
We've missed a few since then. So.
Exactly, because there's albums you discover after the fact. Because for those of you who don't know, Chris and I have been doing this list, not necessarily on YouTube. We had a podcast for a while in 2014, 2015, and then we did it in 2016 and then 2018 or something weird. I don't know. But we've been doing it on YouTube now the last few years. And where was I going with that? My brain just totally... This is not a good start.
I don't know. I think you're just talking about the history of the top 12.
No, I was going to bring it up for something specific. What did you say before that?
Top 12 of the decade.
Oh, yes. For those of you who don't know, I myself have been doing my list since 2010. And so when it got to the year 2020, I did my own best top 12 albums of the decade list, which I have all in a playlist here on my channel. Go check those out. But what I found in doing that, Chris, is that you would think that it would be like the top 2 or 3 from each year, and then you kind of have to put them against the top 2 or 3 from every other year. But that is absolutely not how it ended up for me. I had several albums that weren't on any list because I discovered them either the year after or several years later. And then there were albums that I just didn't realize in that year were as good as they were.
I was going to ask, and I was also going to ask if there was, I mean, that kind of answers the question, but like how many of them changed? Like this album may have been number 1 in 2015, but it didn't hold up over the time.
Oh, absolutely. Like so many of them. And I made like this really awesome chart. It was a spreadsheet actually with every entry from every year. So 12 years, 12 albums, 12 years, and then a whole separate category for albums that I hadn't discovered at the time. And it was really interesting to go through and just look at that. But so we'll have to do that for next year.
How many years did we not do this?
That's a really tough question, something for us to figure out afterwards. Also, I have to just point out while I was at the beginning of this video, and I can't freaking stop sweating, which is so annoying. So if you've been following the channel here this year, you'll know that Chris has joined me for many videos talking about Metallica. We've had my other good friend Chris Schoenberg here with us as well. We've had all sorts of fun throughout the year doing many different reactions is what we've been doing this year. Mainly in terms of Chris Schoenberg, Chris Parker, and myself, we reacted to the entire Metallica catalog. So if you haven't seen any of those videos and you're here just for this video, I promise we'll get to our lists in a minute. But feel free to check those videos out. I think they're really great. We've also reacted to all sorts of other things. Chris Parker and I just recently reacted to the new Peter Gabriel album, so which was really great and had a really cool special reason why we were doing it. So check any of that stuff out if it sounds interesting. But if you have been following me on the channel this last year, you'll know that my health has just been trash the whole year. And so good news on that front is that I had kind of a bad situation the other day, and not to go into it, and it forced me to be like, okay, I've got to go to the doctor and get this. I've got to try to figure out what's been going on. If you haven't been following the channel, you don't know. Basically, I've been sick for like 6 months now with various different things, but I've been sweating a lot. I sweat at night a lot. I have had this weird cough basically for 6 months that just kind of comes and goes, which is why I have a cough drop off to the side that I'll use if I need it, which I'm sure I will at some point. And so anyway, to let everybody know, kind of catch up just a little bit, I went to the doctor. They did a bunch of tests for several different things, but basically they had my blood tested for multiple things, and almost all of it came back as being like pretty normal. However, they discovered that my white blood cells and there's white blood cells, red blood cells, and then there's something else. It starts with a P. It's a word I'd never heard before. It's like pictons or something like that. It's the other thing that like your bone marrow or your body makes. It makes white blood cells, red blood cells, and then this one other thing. And
I don't know it.
right, I was unfamiliar with this too. Apparently my white blood cells and then this other thing that starts with a P are low. And so I have to go see a hematologist, which is a doctor that specializes in blood. I have to go see this specialist doctor on Monday, and they'll try to figure it out. So I'm hoping that it's just a case of we've got to regulate my body somehow to create the correct amount of whatevers, you know? Mm-hmm. And hopefully that will stop all this dumb madness that's been with me. So we'll see what happens, but you'll have to bear with me throughout this video. And I'll try to sweat as little as possible, though we can already see I'm off to a bad start there. And my cough. But one thing that will help me is drinking a cool beverage. Right, Chris? As we always do here on this channel.
That's right.
And so I have a glass with a little bit of mango juice in the bottom of it, and I don't know how well that's going to go with my very first ever Red Bull. Yes, this is a can of the original Red Bull, as you can see here. The flavor that Chris keeps telling me tastes like Sweet Tarts or Sweet Pops or whatever.
Smarties.
Something like that.
Yeah, the rolled up tiny candies.
So this is Red Bull energy drink. I will apparently get wings after I drink this. And so, yeah, let's open it and get my reaction to my very first ever taste. Literally never tasted Red Bull before.
Are you going to taste it without sullying it with the mango first?
Correct. I'm going to drink it right out of the can, which is, I'm sure, how it's supposed to be done. Ooh, it smells very sweet. Wow. Wow. So for the last few, I would say maybe the last 6 or so big videos we've done here on the channel, I have gotten a different energy drink and tried it for the first time. And I can definitively say that of all the different kinds I've tried, Red Bull is by far the worst. My first impression was not good.
Mm-hmm. But there's so many that you've started, you had it, and you're like, this is bad. And then like halfway through, you're like, I think I'm into this.
Correct. You're correct. So I think that maybe we'll get to that. There's like a lingering taste. That's like a bitterness.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, but because here on my channel, I have a glass and our watchers want to know how much of my beverage is left. So I'll
Do they?
I've had people ask, like, dude, how can we know when you have it in the can? So I'm going to pour. Oh my God. Did you know that it was yellow?
I thought it was, I guess I did, yeah. I forgot.
It's pea
I would
color.
have said that, I would have said that it was clear, but it totally is.
It is straight up pea color.
It's so funny because Red Bull is like the first real energy drink. You know,
I know, like
OG.
for sure. Like it's the OG.
And it just, I don't know, the weird taste and the weird pea color is like, these feel like they're, holdovers from the fact that it's OG. Like we've made this flavor and we don't know what we're doing, but now this is what it tastes like. And I guess it's pea colored too. And we can't change that or people will riot.
So anyway, I'll have this off to the side somewhere where you probably won't be able to see the level, but that's all right. Nobody really cares anyway. I was just making all of that up. So, Chris.
Which part did you make up?
The part about people caring how much
I knew
beverage
nobody
I have
gave a
in my glass. No. Oh, that's another thing. Okay. No swearing in this video, okay? You had one. You've been doing so good. You've been doing better every video. Okay, the first Peter Gabriel video, you had 2. The last one, which was much longer video, you only had 1. So I believe in you, Chris. You can do it.
Every time I do it, I know ahead of time I'm going to do this, and it's going to be a problem for him, and I don't care.
It's not the fact that it's a problem. I want us to get to the point where I can be confident that we could do something live.
Sure.
So
I can totally do it live.
Prove to me that you can go for 2.5 hours without swearing.
All right.
Because obviously I know that you can swear. But
I've got a grandmother that I've spent a lot of time around. I know what it's like to go into grandma mode.
Grandma mode. Exactly. Pretend your grandma's here with us. Okay, so 2023, a year in music. How do you feel it panned out?
Nothing compared to last year.
100%.
Last year was enormous. Like ever since I started working from home, I have struggled to stay on top of new music. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of times where even making these lists, it's like I can give you the top 5 and then everything under that is basically on the list because it was in my competitors list, but I haven't listened to it much. And some of that is very much true this year as well. But last year was like, I feel like without even trying, I hit almost 40 albums to choose from.
Yep.
And this year was only 17.
Yep.
And yeah, it just, I think obviously if I was trying as hard as you do, I would come up with more. But it is definitely a year that makes sense to have come after last year, because every single person who's ever made music last year.
Right. And they did it well.
Yes.
Rather than all the people who didn't make music last year decided to make it this year and decided for whatever reason to do it poorly.
Yes.
So I agree with you 100%. That was the big point I wanted us to make, and I'm glad we're on the same page because we didn't really talk about that beforehand. Last year was, in my opinion, the best year that we've ever had since I started doing my lists. I think, hands down, the top 6 albums I had last year destroy anything I've had on my list for the last probably 5 years. I mean, the top 6 albums I had last year, which were, by the way, Poets of the Fall, Joy Wave, White Lies, Mook, Bad Omens.
Bad Omens, that album.
That
is a legendary album.
I think that was 6 albums. Maybe that was just 5. Those albums were like shockingly, outstandingly, phenomenally good. And I don't think anything on my list comes even close to any of those this year. So to me, the top 6 from last year beat out everything on my list this year. I don't think it's even really close. Though I do like a lot of the stuff on my list this year. I would say this year, for me, it was harder making the list because I feel like a lot of it was much more consistent with the amount that I liked it. I also have to say, for me personally, this is the year that I spent the least amount of time, I would say, throughout the year working on the list. Because normally on my channel in years past, the only albums that I react to are new ones that are coming out. And so throughout the year, maybe I would film 12, 15 videos of albums that I was looking forward to. Well, this year we produced way more content, way more videos than just the 12 or 15. And almost everything that we did reactions for this year, which took up a very good amount of a chunk of my year, in terms of, filming, and editing, which takes like 2 or 3 times as long as it has to film. Almost everything we did was an older album from an older band. And that's great. I love doing that stuff. That's why I'm happy to have been so ignorant growing up and not having ever heard a Talking Heads album or a Black Sabbath album or any Metallica albums or whatever, know? So I'm really glad that we did that. But this year I focused less throughout the year on my list. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got tired of wiping sweat off of my face, so I just did this for a while. I'm really hoping that as we get into this, and I have a fan off to the side, that I just stop sweating. For some reason, my body was like, hey, you're going to do something now. You're excited about it. And also there's burning white hot lights right here. Let's sweat everything in you out for some reason. So anyway, let's get back to the year overall. I agree. We both agree that it's definitely a worse year. However, because of what I was saying before, I think that it's not that I put less effort into my list overall. It's just that I didn't work on it as much throughout the year. So for me, this year, my list is a little different in the fact that I made sure to listen to every album in its entirety at least once.
I see.
Which I know sounds kind of silly, but a lot of the times if I like an album, I'll put it on and I'll listen to the first few songs. And then the next time I'm like, oh, I'll like those first few songs again. And then the third time, like a couple weeks later, I'm like, well, I know I've heard the first few songs, so let's just skip to like track 5. Then I'll listen to 5, 6, 7 or so. And over time, you kind of get through stuff. But a lot of the times I would never really listen to the full album. So just over the last couple of weeks now, I've gone back through. And over the course of the year, I've had a few albums that we've talked about on the channel multiple times that have been on my list and basically at the top of my list for the whole year since February. And so some of those things changed, so I think you'll be happy to see that there's a few things changed in that. But there are albums we talked about throughout the year that I told you were going to be high on my list, and they're going to be high on my list. So there will probably be some things that you won't necessarily be very surprised about, Chris. So
right. I have been actively keeping what I suspected to be my number one album a total secret. And there's one song from it specifically that I think I may have sent it to you once, but if I hadn't, I didn't bother like checking to see if you listened to it because I had decided I'm just going to wait. And I've wanted to send it to you 50 times.
Yeah.
And it's still, I have waited.
I definitely have albums that there's a lot of stuff on my list that I'm so excited to show you because I know it's going to blow your mind. But there were other things throughout the year as well that I liked a lot. And I was like, I should send this to Chris. But then I thought, I don't know. I don't know if I should or not, like let him discover it himself. It's kind of a weird dichotomy we have with that because sometimes I'll be like, this is really cool, Chris, you should listen to this. And I don't even give it a second thought. But with other things, I'm like, no, I'm going to keep this one a little tighter to the chest or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Have we ever had a year where we had 0 albums that overlapped?
Nope, we've never had that. And last year we had one of the best moments I think we've ever had in any of these videos or podcasts when we discovered our mutual love of Bad Omens album that we were both like, well, it could be my number one. It's so fantastic.
It should have been number one.
And so like that was a really great moment. And I don't think we're going to have a moment like that this year.
No.
I think that would really be surprising to me. But we may have some surprises. Who knows? Who knows? One other thing we like to do at the beginning of these videos before we start getting into our list is we read through what we refer to as our worth mentioning album list. And so what this is going to be is I'm just going to go through and read. I'll go first. Is that okay, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to go through and read a list of albums that I enjoyed but that didn't make it on either my honorable mentions list or my top 12 list. And the thing that's interesting about these lists always every year, Chris, is that I think that there's usually one album or more in my list that end up being on this list of mine, these worth mentioning, that end up being on your list.
Top 12?
Your top 12.
We'll see. I think that there won't be any overlap there.
There might not this year, but also you're always like, oh, I did not know that band had a new album come out this year. So this is where and you've done that.
That happens.
You've done that to me before too in the past where I'm like, what? I didn't even know that band, Aviva released an album that year. So, all right. So this is my really quick list of albums that I enjoyed, but that were neither on my top 12 list or my honorable mentions list. Okay. Ready, Chris?
I am.
Gorillaz, Blur, Matchbox 20, Econoline Crush, Just Jack, Skindred, Within Temptation, Duran Duran, Beyond the Black, Black Pumas, Taylor Swift, Dan Tyminski, Portugal the Man, Zoodrake, Delane, Blue October, Scar Symmetry, Lacey Strum, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, Tulip, Phantom Elite, Earthside, Super City, Black Pumas again. I didn't realize I had that on twice. The Hogwarts Legacy original soundtrack, Bad Wolves, Bear Ghost, Echo Smith, Stitched Up Heart, Enar Solberg, Bear Mountain, Death Stars, Man with Roses, and Blood Red Hourglass.
Wow.
So that's my quick list. Probably a vast majority of things that you have never heard of.
I actually have heard of a lot of them, if only because they've come up from you before. Like there's a lot of stuff I recognize the name of that I probably
right, and some of the stuff I did videos for, like the Bear Ghost album, which is really phenomenal. And I was trying to get you to listen to it.
I did listen to it.
You did, and I don't know how much you liked it though, because we never talked about it after the fact.
Right, I have thoughts on that album.
So
they're complex.
Yeah, we may get to that later. I don't know, but that's my list of worth mentions. So none of those albums are going to be talked about again by me here on these two videos.
I don't really have a list that is structured quite the same.
That's fine.
I only have like 5 albums
to
bring up in that regard. They don't really fulfill a worth mentioning or honorable mention role specifically, like because there's only 5. But this is effectively like every year what I do is I start a playlist on Spotify called Top 12 Contenders 2020, whatever, what year it is. And then every time a new album comes out that somebody sends me a song and it's like, I like this, I'll throw the album on that playlist, and then I'll try to go through them throughout the year as best I can to decide whether or not the whole album works. And then later on, you know, and then I'll just let the culling process at the end of the year take care of whether or not it stays.
Sure.
And so this year, like I said, there was only 17 albums on my list, in that playlist, because of the way that life is. And so these are the albums that did not survive the cull effectively.
Okay.
There's Archetypes Collide by Archetypes Collide. And it's super heavy, very frantic, and something I really just didn't listen to more than a couple of songs on.
Okay.
I didn't make it. Currents, The Death We Seek, same kind of deal.
Okay.
Pretty heavy metal, a little bit too far into the heavy world for my ultimate taste in that kind of music, and I still just didn't give it a ton of attention. Now, 10 Paces by the Ruin Brothers is something that you sent me, and I would probably put it on an honorable mentions list if I was making one, because it really just sounds fantastic. It is one of the best sounding albums I've heard, definitely this year, and it even falls relatively within my wheelhouse in terms of the type of music I generally listen to. And maybe if I had listened to it more, it might be in the top 12.
Okay.
The other one by Baby Metal, I
didn't
really
know
liked what I heard about from that album. The Tom Morello guest feature song they have is great. And it just missed out to the other ones. And then Formentera 2 by Metric. I did not like Formentera 1. I thought it was very forgettable. And I think I may have heard 40 seconds of this album.
Okay. So you just didn't. Okay. That's fine, though.
And I just, and I meant to listen to it. And like I said, I put it on the list initially, the top 12 contenders list. It automatically goes there because it's Metric. And I've loved Metric for years. And why wouldn't I put them on there? And I just never got around to getting that listened to. I do doubt that it would have made it on the top 12 anyway, based on the previous album, but that's not fair. So we'll just pretend that whatever you need to pretend to continue the conversation. And then my last entry is I.O. by Peter Gabriel, because the music is not necessarily for me, but definitely the most fun listening experience of the year, especially because after we did our videos, I did the other day fire up the Atmos Blu-ray, and it was a carnival. It was such a good time. It's so much more than just this instrument here, this instrument there. Like, there's things that are, they're never quite in the same place twice. There's like little things like beeps and dings that are just, they're persistent, but then they move around and they're all doing all kinds of stuff. It's really an incredible mix. And the vocals are always just planted right hard front center into the center channel, so you can do all kinds of other things around them and they never get lost. It's really genius. It's so good.
That's awesome. Yeah, to be honest, I forgot about that album. I know we just did the videos. I just uploaded it like yesterday. That album would be in my worth mentions, not on my honorable mentions or on my list. So this was where I would have mentioned it had I remembered that.
And you mentioned Bear Ghost, and I wrote down your mention of Bear Ghost because I really didn't like it, and everything about it seemed like I should. And so I had a conversation with a lot of people.
That's what I kind of felt about it too.
And I was like, why? Gang, I need you to help me figure out why I don't like this album. Because on paper, this is, there's 6 things in there that it's like, yep, that, oh yeah. Mm-hmm,
yep, 100%.
So many things. Ludo, Muse, Queen. Like, there's
Weird
so
Al.
many things in that album that are just like, why don't I like this? And I think it's because it's not. There's a thing that happens to me sometimes, or if I hear a band that sounds too much like another band, like if I hear something that's like, this sounds just like Lights, and you listen to it, it's like, this sounds just like Lights, then you're like, I'm going to go listen to Lights.
Yep.
You just, it overlaps with the thing that it reminds you of so much that you're just like, well, I just want to go listen to the thing it reminds me of now. Like, I don't want to listen to this anymore. And it really just felt like it was too many things. It was so many different things from different places, like different music that I already like, where it was like, this does not have its own identity. This is a mishmash of these 5 or 6 artists that I love, and I'm going to go listen to them instead.
Yeah. I think the thing I was saying about that album in my reaction, which you can go watch here on my channel, was that I kind of felt the same way. Like, I was really excited to listen to it and to take it song by song. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is amazing. This is amazing. Like, there's so many elements happening here. To me, the way I describe that album is when you listen to an album, right? And then there's just one song on this album that sticks out as being this like incredible, unique, crazy thing that like you can't believe the band did. This is a whole album of just that song repeated a whole bunch. Does that make sense? Like, I know that's
feels like, I think a lot of people would probably refer to it as try hard.
But the thing is, the thing is like, whatever. I'm sorry. We don't need to talk about this album. This is not an album that's on our lists. Let's get back on track.
Yeah, I just thought it was an
interesting
case point for sure.
Okay, we are back. We've just had a few technical kerfuffles, but I believe in the midst of all of that, I've stopped sweating profusely. None of us, neither Chris nor I, remember really what we were talking about, so why don't we just get to the list? How about that, Chris?
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'm going to go first. And my number 12 album of 2023 is Higher Than Heaven, the deluxe version by Ellie Goulding.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things that I wanted us to do, Chris, and we talked about this beforehand, we want to have the track number and the length of the album, because that's something that you and I have talked about, especially the last few years, getting really frustrated with bands making such short albums and such short songs.
Yes.
So now I say there is a caveat here that the Higher Than Heaven, which is the name of Ellie Goulding's album, the deluxe edition had I didn't write how many tracks there are. There's 5 additional tracks on the deluxe edition. So that brings us up to a total of 16 tracks, full-length songs, no intros, no intermissions, nothing.
Fantastic.
16 completely separate full-length tracks with a runtime of 52 minutes.
That is a robust as an album.
Now, 16 tracks is a lot. That's a lot.
I mean, 11 is fine too.
Right. So
before the deluxe, what was the runtime on the 11 album?
Yes. So the standard edition is 11 tracks, 36 minutes long.
That'll do.
Yep. So 16 tracks, 52 minutes for the deluxe edition. And the reason I say deluxe is because I love all the bonus songs, and to me, it is the definitive version of this album. So why would I not? If there's a deluxe edition of an album, it's probably going to be the album I'm talking about, because why would I not want to include the bonus tracks or whatever?
Same.
So, one other thing I wanted us to keep track of this year, which kind of surprised you when I asked you to do it yesterday, was the country of origin of these artists.
Yeah, that was
very
revealing.
Was that an interesting thing for you when you started getting into your list?
Yeah.
It was interesting to me too, because my first 4 albums we're going to talk about are all from England.
That's amazing.
So go figure that out.
So funny.
So Ellie Goulding, pop star from England. So I have talked before about my love for Ellie Goulding. I think she is one of the, if not the, most special sort of pop stars out there, because she definitely is presented as, and presents herself as, someone along the lines of like a Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Taylor, not really, I guess Taylor Swift. Like, I feel like Taylor Swift is a little different because she presents herself as this sort of like girl next door kind of figure. Whereas like the big pop stars are all these sort of like, you always imagine spotlights on them and just like incredibly expensive clothing, and they're all blonde, and at least whatever, because they can change their hair every day in whatever video or whatever they happen to be doing. But Ellie Goulding is like that. But to me, there's always been just something special about her music, this little extra twist that she has to her music and to her character that make her just stand out, in my opinion. And she makes really bold choices with her albums, to the point where her last album I didn't care for as much, because a lot of it is ballads, which is very surprising for someone who had become very popular doing dancey pop songs. And so, you know, her first album was really great. Her second album was, the songs were stretched out a lot more. There was a little bit of like Depeche Mode influence there. It's a darker album. Her third album is very dancey, and I enjoy that one as well. And then her fourth album was the one with more ballads. So I guess if you think of her catalog that way, it's kind of like a dancey pop album, more of a somber album, longer songs, dancey pop album, and it goes back and forth. So I guess in the cycle of albums, we're up to pop album, and that is absolutely what this album is. Every single song on this album has the exact same structure as every other song on this album. Every song feels very similar to the song that came before it. And that could be a negative, and I guess in some ways it is a negative. However, the formula works so well, and I feel like every song is so catchy and different enough in the way it sounds that I find myself being able to sing along with almost all 16 tracks. And so that to me tells me that I can separate everything in my head a little bit. And even though all the songs do follow the same formula, it's a very formulaic album. It kind of follows this 3-song pattern. So there's a song that's a little bit more sort of modern R&B song, I would feel like a little R&B influenced pop song. Then there's a song that's sort of like a more throwback 80s synth pop song with really cool synth basses. There's a lot of really good synth bass sounds on this album. And then the song after that will be kind of a combination of the two, but maybe a little bit more what I would just think of as standard pop music. And then it kind of just goes those 3 songs, and then it kind of keeps going in that pattern. So those 3 songs, those 3 songs, those 3 songs, those 3 songs, all the way through all 16 songs. There's a lot of Madonna influence, Kylie Minogue influence. There's all sorts of different things like that that kind of make it into this album. But I think overall, at the end of the day, it's just a really good pop album. And I think it might be her best. Well, I don't know if I'd say it's her best album, but it's her most consistent album. And I really like the way every single song sounds. And so I really kind of couldn't deny it. And that's why it ends up on this list at my number 12 spot, which it was a little tough for me to decide what to put in my 12th spot. Because, you know, whatever's your number 12 means the things that you were thinking about, this is what pushed it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the number 12 spot is always a really... Sorry, I'm sweating again. This bandana's soaking wet. The number 12 spot is always a precarious spot that I feel could be almost interchangeable any day. And
that's interesting that you say that, because my top 5 movies list, the number 5 spot is always really nebulous. Like I can never remember what's there every time I bring it up when I talk to people. But the first 4 before that, I have no problem. I know exactly what they are. But number 5 is like, is it this or is it that?
Yeah.
Or was it this thing? And it's just an interesting parallel there for sure.
Well, just for me in my list, you know, I have, not to give anything away because we'll talk about it later, but I have 6 albums that I consider to be sort of honorable mentions. And those are albums that I thought would make it onto my list and just didn't make it on there. And the fact that they're not on the list and Ellie Goulding is on there means that I think at this moment that Ellie Goulding is better than those other 6 albums.
Yeah.
And I think if you asked me tomorrow, maybe I wouldn't think that. You know, so the number 12 spot for me is this sort of like, I can't deny it, and I really think it deserved a spot, even though maybe there are some other albums that I thought should have made it onto my list because they're really unique or they have a specific element to them that makes them cool. This is an album that I feel deserves to be on it. So this is my one like super pop album that I think it's really the only pop album that'll be on the list. Yeah, Ellie Goulding, Higher Than Heaven Deluxe Edition, my number 12.
Wonderful. One thing that I will say very quickly about my top 12 is that it is definitely, I don't know if I can say that for sure, but most of the things on it are from bands that I don't normally interact with.
That's interesting.
Yes. As outlined by my number 12 album, which I actually just discovered yesterday.
Oh.
Which is, yeah, the new Atreyu album, The Beautiful Dark of Life.
No. Interesting. Because Atreyu, for people who have been watching the channel for the last 2 years, Atreyu is the band whose album I always use as an example of what are you guys doing? Because their last album, there was like not a single song over 2 minutes and 15 seconds long.
Interesting.
And I loved the way every song sounded, but I just never even gave that album a chance because I looked at the song lengths and I was like, you're wasting my time, Atreyu, get out of here. So, okay, I didn't even know they had a new album this year. So
yeah, like I said, it came out yesterday.
Oh, I didn't know it just came out. I thought maybe you just found it yesterday.
Oh, no, yeah. It came out yesterday, or at the very least, it came out just recently, and I added it yesterday.
Okay.
But it does quite a bit better with that length problem that you're talking about, because it is 15 songs for a total runtime of 50 minutes, 50.
Wow, that's great.
And it's just really good. Every time, I don't really have a history with Atreyu. I know I like a lot of things that surround their style of music, and every time that I've heard a one-off from various people in my life who like them, I've thought, man, this is good stuff. Yeah, kind of like Rise Against. Like Rise Against is a band that every time I've heard a Rise Against song, I think, this guy has such a unique, shouty, singy voice that I really like a lot. But they've never stuck on to my brain long enough for me to like go home and then explore them further on my own. And Atreyu is kind of the same way, but this album's great.
Really? Is it the thing that I liked about their last album, because I only listened to a few of the songs a couple times, and then I was like, this isn't for me because the songs are all too short. I really liked the drum beats. Like there was a lot of cool electronics. The choruses were all really catchy. It had like really good production, like lots of electronics to it is what I remember. So is that what this is too, or?
Yeah, I'd say so. The production's fantastic. It's really like, I would suspect that Atreyu as a band with people in it they're all getting to be older because they've been around for so long. But I mean, they're still bringing it. It's got some really heavy stuff. They go electronic and do some things that have like really catchy grooves and stuff in it. The vocals sound fantastic. Like they're doing great work.
Yeah, they were a band that I think kind of got made fun of quite a bit after the whole sort of like emo phase of everything kind of started to go away.
There was a time when it was just the least cool thing in the world to like any of that music at all.
Yeah, because when we were in high school, though, that was what was the most popular thing, was all that emo stuff. And I have actually their first album and their third or fourth album. They have an album called Lead Sails Paper Anchor.
Okay.
Lead Sails Paper Anchor, I think. And I have the deluxe edition of that album. It's called Lead Sails Paper Anchor, like 2.0 or something like that. I love it. I think that album is fantastic. The guitar riffs are so groovy and dancey and fun, but they're still heavy. And the whole album still has like a band feel to it, like it's live. It feels like live, real drums. There's still lots of screaming parts. And then after that, I kind of fell away from enjoying them as much, and none of their albums spoke to me at all until this, like their second most recent album, I guess from 2 years ago now, I guess it would have been. I was listening to it and I was like, man, this sounds so cool. And then, yeah, like I said, I totally dismissed it because of the song length. So I wish I had known that this was coming out, but I don't know if I would have been able to put it on my list in just a day. But, you know,
and that's by virtue of how cool, like I've probably only listened to the first half of this album, to be honest, because it's been such a short period of time that it's been out that it's existed.
Do you have the individual lengths of the songs there, or is that?
I don't have them written down, but I've got Spotify here. I can tell you what.
Well, I was just curious, like, are there like, is it like mostly shorter songs and then like a couple of longer songs, or is each song like good and over 3.5 minutes long?
Track 1 is 2:45. Track 3 is 2:34. Track 4 is 2:55. And then everything after that, track 12, 13 is 2:53, and everything else is over 3 minutes.
Okay. Is there like a 5-minute one, or?
There's one that is 4:14.
And how many tracks is it total?
15.
15. So my first album and yours are both over 15 songs, which is pretty crazy to think about.
And I was going to say, when you brought up earlier how much we've both complained about the length of songs and albums this year, my top 12 has really made a fool of me in regards to that, because everything, I mean, there's definitely some shorter albums on here, but they all fall within, there's one album that falls short of the rules.
The rules.
But everything else fits within the window. So I was like, well.
Awesome. That gets me excited to hear some Atreyu. We'll have to. Oh, we should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but I'll just say it now. Our plan this year is to have no music whatsoever in this video, and then the part 2 that we do, because that way I can monetize these videos. And get some money so that I can get a PS5 to play GTA 6, but also just to keep it as simple as possible and not have to worry about any copyright stuff. And then we want to get together sometime in the next couple of weeks to show each other some of the songs from some of the bands on our lists that I don't think either of us are going to know. So we're going to have like a fun listening party at some point where we can just get together and listen to a bunch of songs, show each other a bunch of music. And that's when we'll talk about and listen to the actual music from these albums. So enough of talking about someone that's not relevant here. We're talking about my number 11, which is the album Memento Mori by the band Depeche Mode.
Oh, wow. Only at number 11.
So yes, number 11. It's a little surprising to me as well. So I wrote down that this is the band's 15th studio album, and it is this album marks 42 years since their debut album. So they've been a band for 42 years. This is their 15th studio album. I thought that was relevant because they're definitely the longest running band on my list.
That's huge. That's a long time.
Yep. And this album, I did a reaction to this video on my channel. You can go watch it. It had a really surprising amount of views, which was a really great surprise. I believe they allowed me to use the music in it, which was also a great surprise. It is 12 tracks, 50 minutes long, which is great. Depeche Mode from England, for those of you who don't know. This album was really interesting because I can't remember the exact order of things, but they were working on the album, and then it was released that Andy Fletcher passed away while they were working on the album.
And he was
the third member of the band who really didn't do anything in the band, in the music. It's really awesome. Like, his story is like, he is the guy who stands up on stage the whole time they perform, and they don't have his keyboard plugged in or turned on. So like, but the thing,
he's just playing the game without putting the quarters in.
Yes. But like, it's like a kind of a running joke in the music industry, like the Andrew Fletcher, like the third member of Depeche Mode. The thing that he did was he was basically their general manager. Like, he organized all the tours, all the people to go on the road with them, booked studio time. He did like everything other than create the music for the band so that Martin and Dave could just go in and be creative. Not to say that they couldn't do those things as well, but Fletcher was just the guy that did all the like manager stuff. And because of that, they just always kept him as the third member of the band. You know, when they were younger, he would play on keyboards and he would contribute little bits here and there to the albums. But his primary role from the very beginning, 42 years ago, was to sort of act as the band's manager. And so when it was announced that he passed away, not too long after that, Depeche Mode held their their press conference. Depeche Mode, for the last probably 15 years, whenever they get ready to release an album, they'll have a press conference about 6 months or so out from when the album is going to be released. And they announce a tour. They talk about the album. They unveil like the track list and all this stuff. And it's really cool. It's like a legit press conference on a big stage with an audience full of people and a bunch of journalists there who then ask questions. It's actually awesome. I wish more bands would do stuff like that, but not every band is as big as Depeche Mode, obviously. Mm-hmm. But it was announced that the album was going to be called Memento Mori, and that the most of the songs, almost all the lyrics to the songs, and the title of the album were all made before Fletch passed away. And so it's kind of a whole really interesting thing. And I know that it doesn't say anything about the music. So To get into why it's number 11 on my list and not higher, because for those of you who don't know, I absolutely love Depeche Mode. And I think that Depeche Mode's albums have been getting better basically for the last 20 years.
Wow.
I think since Exciter, which for those of you who know about Depeche Mode, I think literally since Exciter, every single one of Depeche Mode's albums have gotten better and better, with the only possible exception being Sounds of the Universe to Playing the Angel. Because I think Playing the Angel was phenomenal, and I think Sounds of the Universe was just a little bit underneath that. And then every album since then's gotten better. But honestly, we're talking about such a marginal difference there that it really doesn't matter. But Depeche Mode has been making the best music they've made their entire career in the last 20 years. Which again, we're only talking about like 5 album releases or so in that time, because they release an album every 4 years, and this will be the longest stretch between albums that they've ever had because of COVID. Because they were scheduled, I think, to release an album in 2021, and then it got pushed back 2 years. So, this album is much slower and chill than the previous few albums. I think one of the reasons I liked their last album, which is called Spirit, so much was because it was the first Depeche Mode album to really feature like aggressive drums on it. They used a live drum kit, and a lot of the like drum samples that they used were realistic sounding drums. And I really liked that a lot, because Depeche Mode for the last 4 or 5 albums have been all about the digital distortion. All about just making everything sound like it's a machine that's broken, creating these sounds. Cool. And then having Dave's really awesome vocals over the top of it, or Martin if he's singing the song. And this album, everything's a little bit cleaner, and there's a lot less crazy distortion, and the songs feel a lot more thoughtful. However, because of that, to me, it brings the album, my overall enjoyment of it, down from some of their previous albums. So I think I was slightly disappointed with this album, but still being slightly disappointed with the Depeche Mode album doesn't mean it's not like a phenomenal Depeche Mode album.
Right.
So that's why it's not lower on my list, but I definitely still think I enjoy it. I can sing along with almost all the songs. There's a couple songs that really stand out to me, but my favorite song I think right now by far is Caroline's Monkey. I think it is so awesome, and that's the song that I'm going to make you listen to. It's such a great song. But there's a lot of really good melodies on this. They do something I've wanted them to do a lot more, which is to have Martin and Dave sing a little bit more together on songs. Generally, Martin only does background vocals for Dave, and then Martin will sing his own songs. So there's usually 2 or 3 songs on every Depeche Mode album where it's just Martin singing. And then Dave sings lead on every other song with Martin doing like vocal harmonies for him. But on this album, they had like, I think 1 or 2 songs where they kind of both sang lead in the song a little bit. And so that was a cool surprise to have, because that's something that I've wanted them to do for mostly their whole career, and they haven't done
harmonies
that
or like a back and forth kind of thing.
Do it more of like a back and forth type of thing. Yeah, they always do the harmonies, but to have them both sing distinctly their own parts within the same song is a very unique occurrence in the 42 year of Depeche Mode. So
cool.
All right, there you go. My number 11.
You always have so much more to say about your albums than I do.
I know, and this year I really wanted to try to like pare it way down so we could get through these faster, but
I mean,
whatever.
It'd be better for the content if I had more to say, because you're like, here's an album that, you know,
well, because I can talk,
and I go, I like it.
I found it yesterday. It just came out. I listened to half of it.
It just came out. I thought the name was cool. Now it's your turn. Number 11 is a new artist.
Okay.
Named Witches. Witchz.
Oh, no, okay. Not what I thought it was.
The album is called Santi Minogo III, and it is the only album that violates the rules. It is 10 songs at 25 minutes.
Okay. Now, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
You said it's a new band. Did you just mean new for you, or that this is like a debut album?
This is definitely a debut album, and a way that I have been very frustrated by, because technically it's not.
Okay.
Because this is something that I've probably brought this up to you vaguely over the year at some point, but this dude, if you look at the Spotify discography list,
Oh no.
has 3 different albums that came out this year.
And every one of them is just 2 songs, probably.
More or less. Every one of them is...
People need to learn how to use Spotify correctly. Okay? Don't just upload a single and click the first thing that says it's an album. Stop doing that. I hate that, Chris. It makes me so mad when I look at a band's discography and I click on the album section and it's just like everything they've ever released is an album. No, it's not. Stop it.
I hate that. Hate that about Spotify specifically, is that it is not an album just because it is a song. And I think that it's tricky
that's the
because
artist. It's them choosing that. When you upload,
that might be true.
When you upload your song, you can choose what category it is, and people are just dumb
that's a good point.
and they leave it as album. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Well, and this is one of the most egregious examples of that I have come across ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost worse because every album is like, at the very least, probably 6 to 8 songs. And they are all different versions of the same song on every album. And so it's like putting out iterations almost. Like, here's an album called Kill 'Em, and it's got, Kill 'Em and Seasons and The Master and The Wicked and Drowning and those, like, all of these songs on it. But so does the album called Santi Minogo 2 and The Master, which is the most recent one before this, has a lot of those same songs, but like, here's a dream mix, and here's an instrumental, and here's a demo version, and here's another one with the same title that has no determining factor between it and the final version that you can discern. And it's like, what? It is one of the most confusing things that I have come across in music, is just trying to figure out what this guy is trying to do with the way that he's putting this music out. And so he finally put out an album, Santi Minogo III, that I have determined to be album enough.
Okay.
In its structure and finality that I can call it good. And it's like it's 10 songs, and every single song is title and then album mix in capitals with parentheses.
Okay.
It's like,
that's
I don't know
pretty
how
definitive.
That's pretty definitive. So
Yeah.
I was going to, finally, here's an album. But man, oh man, keep it to yourself until you have, this is just the album version of Final V2 Final, like.
Yep.
But it's somebody that I originally came across on TikTok. There was a clip of one of his songs that was getting used in a lot of videos, and it's really, really cool. He's got a very, very unique sound that is almost a little bit too...
What a time.
It's almost a little bit too samey across every song, where it's almost like, oh, you found this really cool progression, and now you're just putting it in everything.
Yep.
It's more complex than that, but his sound is so unique that you just hear it every time.
So what is it?
It's electronic.
Okay, I've been waiting for you to explain what it is.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, oh no, well, how do I explain it?
Okay, I love it. That's great.
It's like really dark electronic. I think that you'd like it quite a bit, actually.
Okay.
The vocals are super low and like a little bit... Whiny isn't the word I want to use, because it's also a very low register, very low timbre speaking. It doesn't have the high whiny thing, but it's almost like if there was a low whiny.
Low whiny. Okay.
But I don't know. I'm looking forward to you hearing it, because it's super catchy, and I mean, all the songs are great. They're a little samey, but they're all great, and I am really looking forward to the future of the stuff that he makes, because it's cool, and I hope that in the future it is less frustrating to actually find the thing that you could consider to be an album. If
you just came across these 10 songs, you didn't know anything else about him, did all that other stuff affect your opinion of this? Were you waiting for him to release an album and finally he did? So okay.
I was waiting for him to release an album, because it's one of those things where like you find him and you're like, a single, there's an album coming.
Yep.
And then, New Release Friday comes, and I pull up YTM, and it's like, new album by Witches. And I was like, yeah, here we go. And it's like, what the hell is this? What is this mess? And it's like that happened like 3 or 4 times before finally I was like, oh, album mix. Thank God. Hooray. I can care about this now.
That's awesome. So for you, how was the argument that I'm sure you had with yourself over this breaks our rules, but it's good enough that I'll allow it?
The relief of just an album that looks and sounds like an album was enough that I was like, whatever, man. You made it.
You made an album.
You got it.
Okay.
There's 10 songs here. They're all really short, but you made it. You got an album out, so I'll throw it on the list because it's super catchy regardless of the length.
Okay. That's awesome. I like it. Okay, so we are on to
And both of my albums so far are from the U.S.
Oh, okay. Yes. Please try to remember that. All right, my number 10, I believe we're on then. This was an album that I was actually anticipating for quite a while. I will say that what I did this year, and this is the first year I've ever done this, I've been using the calendar on my phone this entire year to, if I hear of an album that's going to be released however many months away it is or weeks, I'll pull up my calendar and I will go to a specific time of the day that Friday the album releases, and I'll put an event on there, and I'll put the name of the band there. Mm-hmm. And so all year, I can actually look at my calendar and go back and see, like, all year I have multiple, like here, the 15th of September, K-Flay, Nation of Language, Tesseract, all had albums released that day. On September 22nd, the Starbenders, a band called Three Teeth, but with Threeth, like the number 3 teeth, and Kylie Minogue all had albums that day. So I kept, on my calendar, I was using it as a way to know what was coming up, and then that was sort of one of the ways I kind of tried to decide what we should react to on the channel.
I did that for a while. I think it was last year. I was going through Album of the Year and just looking at release dates that were known for stuff, and then I would actually put them on my calendar. And I had that run through about 3 or 4 months, and it was always like, well, something that happens to me. This is completely irrelevant, but something happens to me that frustrates me with writing stuff down to remember it and like putting it in calendars and stuff and reminder apps. And it's like, as soon as I actually do the writing, that logs it in. And so then the writing feels pointless because it's like, oh yes, the reminder for the thing I didn't forget.
Right.
But that was a nice little thing where it was like, oh yeah, look at this working. I'm so happy about the thing I've done. Like I totally forgot this was coming.
Yeah. See, to me, I would get a little bit of overload if I looked at a website that had like just all these new releases coming out. So what I just did was the way I usually discover music, mostly through Facebook, but I would see an ad for a band that was like, hey, our new album comes out whenever. And if it was something that I was interested in at all, most of the time it would be, here's this, we're so excited to debut the single for our new album that comes out in like 3 months or whatever. Mm-hmm. Here's the single. And if I listened to the single and I knew they had an album coming out, then I would add the album to my calendar. And I did that with this album, with this band that's my number 10, months and months and months before the album actually came out. And so I had been looking forward to this album for quite a long time. And then when it finally came out, I was slightly disappointed with it. I only listened to the first few songs and I was like, this is mixed weird. It's mixed differently than, I don't want to say differently than anything else I've ever heard like it, but it was just mixed a little bit differently. And the singer's voice was really present, like more present than I feel I've ever heard for this style of music. And I didn't really get what they were doing. And over the course of the year, I've listened to the album several times, and I feel like it clicked with me a lot more when I listened to it like in my basement over the nice speakers. I was listening to it and I was like, I think I get the mix and I get what they're doing and I really like it. And then I went back and listened to it on headphones again and I was like, yes, this works. What they're doing here, it works. And I don't want to make it sound like this is like some revolutionary thing because it's not. It's just slightly different than anything else I've heard like this. So the band I'm talking about for my number 10 is, the band is called As Everything Unfolds and their album is called Ultraviolet. this is a band from England. Their album is 11 tracks at 36 minutes. So it's pretty short. I actually brought this band up in a recent video we were doing because this band can be summed up very easily. They are a combination of Paramore, The Birthday Massacre, and Spirit Box. That is what they are.
Yeah, you brought them up. We were talking about them the other day.
Just recently in the Spirit Box video when we did the EP.
That's why.
That is the perfect way to explain this band.
They have compelling. That makes me want to listen to them.
They have the look of the Birthday Massacre. Everything they wear is purple. Everything they have on their Facebook page, the internet is purple. Everything is purple. So I love that. They have, and maybe that's just recently because their album's Ultraviolet, but all the marketing I've seen for them is purple, which is for those of you who don't know the Birthday Massacre, they're my favorite band for many years. They're a band Chris and I have talked about a lot. To me, they're like one of the seminal bands in my life in terms of like, they were my number one favorite band for many years. So if you're unfamiliar with them, just go look them up. The Birthday Massacre, they're great. Female fronted, sort of fantasy, dreamlike sounding heavy band.
Who? Birthday Massacre?
But no screaming.
Yeah, they're definitely the first time that I like that sparkly kind of. There's a very specific sound that comes with Birthday Massacre, and I realized that it's synthwave. The synthwave elements that are,
but not the
music.
synthwavey elements, not the synth bass. You know.
Oh, but the rest of the synths are very synthwave.
The rest stuff of it, but not the core of synth bass. Like the Birthday Massacre is not dancey at all.
Right. No, they are a rock band that uses some pretty very strategically placed higher register synthwave sounds, and it's a really great sound, and it's something that I had heard nobody else do for a very long time.
It's very throwback 80s sounding.
Yeah.
Anyway, as everything unfolds, they do little bits of that with their synths, but I would definitely say that they are not like a synth-focused band. There are electronics in their music, and they does stand out. But if you took all of the electronic elements away, there'd still be like a whole song there. Whereas I feel like with the Birthday Massacre, if you took all the electronic elements away, you wouldn't necessarily be left with a full song.
You'd be left with some pretty boring elements.
Yeah. And then the female singer has a scream. So she screams occasionally in some of the songs, not all of the songs. So they're very much like Spirit Box in that regard. And I like her scream. It's a very unique sort of intense scream/yell. She has like a scream, but then she also has a yell.
I was going to say, it just made me think about the difference between screaming and yelling.
Yeah. So she can do kind of both of those. And she can, but usually what she does is she does more of like a yell, and then she has like a lower scream that they overdub it with, so it feels bigger. And those moments are really heavy on the album. And her singing, I really like a lot. And it reminds me a lot of, I forget her name, but the lady from Paramore. I forget her name. But because Paramore released an album too this year, but I didn't care about that at all. But anyway, there's like a pop punky attitude with it as well. The heavy stuff is really great. It reminds me of Spirit Box. The mix, like I said, is interesting. The kick and the snare and her vocals are the most prominent thing, which I always talk about is how pop music is mixed, right? Kick, snare, vocal. That's what pop music is. Everything else is basically interchangeable in a pop song. And when you take rock music or heavy music and you mix it that way, you approach it that way, sometimes it can lose the heaviness, but that's okay because what the song's going for is not necessarily being heavy. What they did with the mix on this album is really interesting, though, because her vocals are so dry and kind of clean and upfront. It's almost like you're hearing... It's almost like there's nothing hiding the vocals, if that makes sense. Like there's at no point are the vocals not kind of the focal point of what you're hearing, even though I don't want to make it sound like they're too loud because they're not too loud in context of the mix, but it's almost like you're hearing things that should be hidden in the vocal track. Like it's very I know Chris Schoenberg
Raw?
hates this word. It's very raw sounding. You're hearing what she did in her performance. And I think that was one of the aspects of it that threw me off at first, because it's very much like I said, what you're hearing is what they performed. And that's kind of a more rare thing nowadays. Usually when heavy bands have singing in them, there's like auto-tune all over the place because the singer focuses more on like harsh vocals. And then when they get to the clean vocals, it's like, who cares, just throw on auto-tune or whatever. But this doesn't really have that. It's very laid out there bare. And the cool thing about the mix is that's kind of how everything is approached. Like the bass is just the bass line. It sounds great. The guitar is like, you can clearly hear every element of the mix. And like I said, not every song has the heavy parts in it, but the songs that are heavy really bang. They're really heavy and they're great. The songs that are more sort of pop punky, happy sort of sounding, honestly, I like them too. They're really great. The vocal harmonies are great. The vocal melodies are great across the album. This is something you could sing along with. I find her voice to be very pleasant to listen to. And so, yeah, this album, the more I listen to it, every time I like it more. It's a little short. Like I said, it's only, I think, 36 minutes. Is that what I said it was? 36 minutes, 11 tracks. I think there's one song, maybe two, that are instrumentals or like intermissions leading into something. So that's kind of a type of thing.
Yeah.
But, 9, 10 full songs, that's okay. Birthday Massacre has been...
I'm very interested.
Yeah, I'm really curious to show... I'm excited to show you this one. Because if you asked me which I liked better, Spirit Box's album from 2 years ago, Eternal Blue, or this album, I would hesitate for a little bit before I said Spirit Box's album. But the fact that I would even hesitate at all tells you how good this is, in my opinion.
That's awesome.
So that's...
Absolutely.
As Everything Unfolds is the name of the band.
Good.
They're not a huge band. They got much bigger this year, and I didn't look up. I was going to look up their like Spotify following, but they are not a huge band. So
I got in my YouTube Wrapped. There was a mention of this band. I may have sent her to you at some point. Her name's Chinchilla.
Oh, I don't remember that, but
Then yeah, that'll be really interesting to send you. But it was like, this band has gotten like 3 times bigger, or like tripled their listeners or something in the time since you found them. So basically it was like, yeah, you were first. You're cooler than everybody else. And I was like, yeah.
That's nice. Did anything else come up on your Spotify Wrap, by the way? I was going to bring that up at the beginning.
Well, see, that's the thing. So I have Spotify and YouTube Music, and I have them separate because what I try to do, I listen to game music and stuff and soundtracks overwhelmingly while I work. And that makes my, end of the year wrap-ups, it taints them a bit.
Sure.
And so what I try to do is relegate all of that to YouTube Music. And then when it comes to listening to real music, I use Spotify. And that way it tracks the, listening and stuff very differently. My Spotify Wrapped this year was very, very sad. It was very sad. It was like, you listen to one genre. And it was like, God, don't even tell me about this.
I think for me, it only said 7. So I think, I don't know what,
Yeah. And then my YouTube Music one was a little bit more informative, but it was also like, you listen to 647,000 hours of soundtracks. It's like, that's not very realistic either. So it's been tough to figure out what's what.
Yeah.
My PlayStation Wrapped is much more interesting to look at. But
mine this year is not interesting at all. You played 73 hours of Hogwarts Legacy.
The end.
The end. Exactly. The end.
Mine said I can't believe I'm going to say this in a public forum, but my total played hours this year was 756.
Wow. Holy. And that's spread out over a lot of games though, right? Like you didn't put 500 hours into Final Fantasy Online or anything like that.
I put 500 hours into Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh my God. And that game just came out, Chris. Holy crap.
Dude, don't you have to tell me? Like, I don't know. Like, this is all I do, man.
Holy cow.
Such a piece of garbage.
Hey, it's all research for work though, for you. So
that's right. Yep.
You can write it off.
That's exactly what it is. I can write it off. Exactly. If there was such a thing as time taxes.
Okay, anyway, on to your number 10.
Number 10. of a band that you're very familiar with, and I'm not sure if we'll find this on your countdown list or not. But In Flames, Foregone.
Oh, okay. This is on my list.
Very good.
Hold on, let me look.
Maintain a non-zero number of overlap.
Wait, this is my number 9. So
beautiful.
we can just cover both of them right now.
Yep, go ahead. Start talking.
No, I'm curious what you have to say, because this was one I've been looking forward to. I had it on my calendar for a long time. Their last 2 albums have super disappointed me, like really terrible. And so you and I both like In Flames. I think I've been a fan of them for much longer.
You like them more than me, for sure.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. Did I tell you about this and then you go look it up, or did you discover this?
Yes, I'm pretty sure you brought it up, though I can't imagine something that tells me about new music wouldn't have told me about
you
a new
definitely
Flames
would
album.
have come across it.
Yeah, so either way, it was coming up.
I want to know what you think about it first. Well, actually, first let's do our information about it, just to let everybody know. So,
it's 12 songs, 47 minutes.
Yep, and I wrote down this is their 14th studio album, and this is their 29th year as a band.
Okay.
So,
and they are one of
Sweden.
only 2 bands on my list that are not from the U.S.
Okay.
They are Sweden.
Okay.
I've wanted to listen to In Flames for a long time. And what is stopping me, you ask? Shut up, I say.
Well, okay.
And so this year, this album came out, and I remember listening to it early on, like right when it came out. And I was like, this is good. I like this. I like this. And I've been through it a few times over the years. I haven't listened to it. I listened to it a little bit yesterday as I was going through these to see how I wanted them all to stack up with each other.
Yeah.
And I had a revelation yesterday about them that was not particularly interesting, but I thought this band, and I think more specifically, this very particular type of metal that they make sounds just like Unearth. Like these 2 bands are one and the same almost in the way that they sound and the type of metal that they make. Like In Flames, and I'm not going to let Chris say anything about what constitutes metal when I say this, but like, for example, In Flames and Bad Omens, both metal, very different types of music.
Yes.
And so it's like In Flames and Unearth, extremely similar types of metal for me in my mind.
See, I don't know that much about Unearth, but when I think of Unearth, I think of no keyboards whatsoever.
Yes, I agree with that.
Well, then, to me, the keyboard elements are so important in Flames that's hard for me to see the connection, unless you're just talking about like riffs and stuff. Where
I think maybe specifically like guitar tone, like just the overall tone
and just what they're doing in
metal
general.
Type. Yeah.
Because does Unearth do they have clean vocals as well?
Yeah.
I know so many of those bands, because when I think of Unearth, this is my limited knowledge of them. I think of them gaining popularity around the same time I discovered In Flames, because I'm sure I have a compilation like the Headbangers Ball Volume 1 or 2 or something that has like Unearth and In Flames on like the same disc. So definitely around the same time. Unearth is from the US though, right?
I think yes.
So they were kind of around the same time as like Killswitch Engage and It Dies Today and stuff like
American
that.
Metalcore.
Yeah.
They started in 98.
Okay. Yeah, In Flames started 1991 or whatever, I think. 92 is their first album. But, okay, that's interesting. Sorry, a lot of those bands that started around that time that we're talking about, 90s, they almost all started with no singing whatsoever in them. And then over time, when singing in metal became okay, like you could finally do it without having to hide your face or wear a mask when you're performing live.
Right.
Nowadays, almost every band, no matter who they are, has some clean vocals whatsoever. But In Flames...
And I also wonder, too, how much of a part is played in that by it not being especially easy to maintain your ability to sing over the course of 25 years, or scream rather, harsh vocals, you're going to switch to singing because you need to survive.
Yeah. I do know In Flames was one of the bands that definitely pioneered that like clean, like screaming verses sung or more melodic choruses. But anyway.
Which I love.
Yes.
I have no problem with that.
I would say that's my
structure at all.
favorite style of metal. If I could pick, it is really fun to have sung verses and then screamed chorus, but that's a pretty rare occurrence.
It is rare. I was just wondering if I've ever heard that before.
Well, I can only think of like a few songs, but In Flames definitely has some. In Flames, every single In Flames album has at least one track there's no singing on, it's just screaming. And then they also usually have one or two songs that it's just singing, but that is something that has kind of been a little bit more of a recent thing. But okay, so let's talk about Foregone. So how do you feel about this album compared to any of the other stuff from them that you've heard, and what made you like this enough to put it on your
They had
list?
a previous album that had an 8-bit counterpart, which was a really interesting thing.
That was their last album called Eye the Mask.
Yes, and I really liked that 8-bit version of that album.
Okay, that's really interesting, but that's
it was
cool.
super cool. I think I also listened to the main album a handful of times. I don't think I could give you any like melodies from it. I just thought that was super cool that they put out an 8-bit version, and it was like
an official version too. Yeah, they officially released it.
It was sort of a pseudo 8-bit. Like it wasn't nearly as harsh or crunchy as pure like 85 8-bit. It was more like, what we would make 8-bit sound like now, where we can really sort of adjust exactly how savage it is inside your brain so that you can still listen to it. And I thought that was super cool. But I have not really listened to any In Flames. Like I haven't listened to enough of it, especially to be able to say what this album brings that the other one didn't. I just am, trying, when I see new music from them, I try to engage with it more. And this is right within the realm of the type of metal like this that I am happy to listen to. And the screaming thing and the sung chorus and like their melodies are super catchy and stuff. It's really cool.
Now you went with me to an In Flames concert, I believe.
I did once in Lincoln in 1944.
Well, the reason we went was the reason you went was because Demon Hunter was playing, which you were a bigger fan of them, and then you were impressed with In Flames, and I think it was after that you started looking into them a little bit.
Was In Flames the headliner?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, it's In Flames. As great as Demon Hunter is.
I was going to say, if it was any other way, it would have been disappointing.
So Foregone for In Flames, I do have a reaction to this album up on my channel. You can go watch the whole thing. And it's really interesting because when I first made my first draft of this list, they were my number 12. This list was my number 12. And I was like, it was the album that was on the bubble. And the reason for that is because I listened to it. If you watch my reaction, I flip out over how great I think the album is in the moment. And then after that, throughout the year, this is one of the few albums that I actually got in physical format. So I have the CD copy of Foregone, which, by the way, there's like a deluxe iTunes version that has a bonus song on it that I've never heard, and it pissed me off once I saw that, and I was like,
that's a bummer.
Dang it. If I'm going to get the physical version nowadays, the physical version is the deluxe edition. So you should, if you're a band, put all the things you have on the physical version, okay? Because it's probably going to cost more than any deluxe edition will digitally nowadays. And the people who are buying it physically are the true fans of your music. So give them everything. Anyway, at the time when I was doing the reaction, the thing that struck me the most was how this album really is the most perfect combination of all the different things they have done throughout their career. And I remember before I did that video, I was doing a little bit of research and I found an interview with Anders Frieden, the guy who sings for In Flames. And he said, and he could freely say now, that they were under a very terrible record contract with their last 3 albums. And the record label forced them to make a few albums that they did not want to make. And that's why 3 albums ago, they released an album called Battles. And it's a really interesting album because I think there's some really interesting and cool song things that they did, but the mix is terrible. It's a really bad mix, which is so disappointing. But he specifically said that they wanted them to make music that sounded more like Imagine Dragons. Which I love Imagine Dragons, so the idea of a metal band incorporating more like Imagine Dragons-y stuff in it is kind of exciting to me. But when you listen to that album, you can definitely tell that they didn't want to be making the kind of music that they were being forced to make. And in this interview, Anders went hard on them, and he was like, we couldn't do it anymore. So he's like, we got out of our contract and we left. And so this is their first album that they've gotten to make, that they actually wanted to make in quite some time. And the really cool thing about it is that they kept elements from everything that they've done across their career. So this album in some ways is, I feel, it's definitely some of the heaviest music they've made in the last 10 years, easily.
Cool.
There's heavy stuff. There's fast stuff. There's a lot of things on this album that remind me of Reroute to Remain, which is considered one of their classic albums. But there's also a lot of stuff on this album that remind me of Soundtrack to Your Escape, which is their album that came out after that. There's a lot of like poppy stuff on this album, like pop stuff on this album, where the vocals are just very singy along with, you know. There's soaring choruses. There's all sorts of good stuff on this album. I think the guitar solos across the entire album, phenomenal guitar solos. Nice. Some of the best solos they've had their entire career, easily. Their last few albums, they haven't really even had any guitar solos at all. So to have the guitar solos come back. And the thing about In Flames too is I think there's only 2 members of the band that are like actual original In Flames members anymore. The singer and the guitar player. Everyone else is a newer person. Mm-hmm. All the other members of the band have gone on to form other bands because they were like, we can't deal with this record label crap. And so there's like 2 or 3 other bands out there based on In Flames members, and other bands like, you know, like Dark Tranquillity and Soilwork and stuff, where people have left and created new bands. Sorry, I'm getting in the weeds a little bit. The reason this album was going to be higher on my list was because when I listen to this album, I'm struck by the idea that some of the songs just feel like there's no transitions. It's just a really cool part that goes right into another really cool part, but there's really nothing bridging the parts together. It almost feels like separate thoughts, and they just didn't have a way to connect them. So they just are like, here's the end of the verse, here's the chorus. Just big, shouty, awesome, fun, great, melodious chorus. And then afterwards, it just goes right back into like the riff or whatever. And it doesn't feel like anything transitions naturally. Now, that's some of the songs. Not every song is like that. I do feel like some of the songs felt like they had a little bit more thought put into them. But the more I listen to this album, the more I kind of get that feeling. So as the year went along, I kind of got a little bit more disappointed with this every time I would listen to it. And then I'd put it on and I'd listen to it again and I'd be like, you know what? These songs are all just so great. Mm-hmm. You know, the melodies are so good, because In Flames has written bad songs before. Like, they have disappointing albums. And so to hear an album that works so well on so many levels after so many years of, like, it's been a while since you could like confidently be like, yeah, I love this newest In Flames album. Like, going back 2-3 albums, it's almost like you had to kind of make excuses for like why you liked an In Flames album. And for so many years, people have been complaining about the fact that they're not heavy enough and that they're a shell of themselves and that they sold out and all this other stuff. And to have this album that's so much faster and heavier really made a lot of the old school In Flames fans happy. However, amidst that like faster, heavier parts, there's still these amazing clean vocals with lots of layering and really cool keyboard parts and all sorts of really good things that they've added to the band over the last 10 years. So it really is a cool amalgamation of everything they've done in their career up to this point. And that's why I decided to move it further up my list to number 9. And why I decided not to keep it lower on the list, but also because I mentioned why it's not higher on my list. Mm-hmm. So those are all my thoughts on the album. So great. Do you disagree with any of that, not knowing as much, or?
No, I don't really have a space to agree or disagree. I think, I would love to go through it again. I should have all of these albums should have gotten a full front to back listen yesterday. But I also did not realize that yesterday, I did not realize that we were doing this tomorrow. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know. It's always good.
I thought it was.
I'm like, I really should message Chris and just make sure he knows what we're doing.
Yeah, and God forbid I write anything down. This weekend I feel like is booked rock solid, and I don't know even if that's true. I just keep saying to people, let's do it this weekend. I got nothing going on. And you say that 10 times and suddenly you don't get to, you don't go home when it's light out.
Yep, yep, 100%.
So, yeah, but I would love to have given this more time to have more thoughts on it.
Well, and it's
the things that, like, my top 5, I think, 6... Yeah, top 5, top 7, roughly, is when I'll start to actually have more to say about what I've got on my list.
That's fine. I mean, that's fine. And if people who are watching this, they would like us to do some In Flames reactions on the channel in the future, let us know, because I would totally be down to like listen to a few, like find a few cool In Flames songs from back in the day or whatever, and see what Chris thinks about them. But yeah, awesome. We can move on to your number 9.
Yeah, one thing that makes me not cringe at the idea of doing that is that you probably would never point me in the direction of something old that sounds terrible.
No.
Because that's one thing that always messes me up when going back and listening to a band's older stuff is like, seems cool, I guess, but it's just so unrefined, you know? And
that kind of stuff is only useful if you're a big enough fan of the band that you want to know where they came from. Yeah, totally. I totally understand.
So number 9, another band that I am aware of but have never really listened to is Pierce the Veil.
Okay.
Their new album, Jaws of Life.
Wow, okay.
Which, 12 songs, 41 minutes, USA. Everybody on my list is USA. Almost all of them are California, which makes me feel bad.
Yeah, that's...
But I don't like the lack of regional diversity in my list.
The lack of regional diversity.
But this album is grabbed my attention early on. It came out. It was one of the first new albums of the year that I listened to.
So it stood the test of time.
Yeah, and like I said, everything goes into the playlist when it happens, and then I go through and I decide. But it's a bit of a departure from their other type of stuff, from what I understand. Like I said, I don't interact with Pierce the Veil very often, but it's like they have very much like a metalcore sort of post whatever screamy, heavy, emo kind of vibe. And this album dips quite a bit more into like grunge. And I've been hearing a return to grunge in the last handful of years, like Bad Flower, super grungy, and then there's like a band that I like that I learned about last year called Royal and the Serpent.
That's very, a cool band name.
Yeah, very grungy. And like,
so let me ask this real quick: when you say grungy, does that mean less heavy?
Not necessarily. I think overall grunge is a less heavy genre than something that would be more akin to metal or post-core or metalcore or anything like that. It is, I would say, less heavy, a bit more traditionally rocky, but in a very grunge specific way. Like they have a song on this album called, and I wish I had not closed that tab. They have a song on this album called Past the Nirvana, which is like very specifically sounds like a Nirvana song. And it's not a cover of anything of Nirvana's, but it just it's in that same style, that spirit for sure.
I mean, but they're telling you that with the title of the song. So
yeah, it's not a complaint. It's just like, it's so cool to hear this type of music working its way back in. And I look forward to a lot more of it. And I was really pleasantly surprised. I know you hate grunge. And
Maybe
I wonder,
we can change that if we listen
I was
to
going to
the
say,
right
because based on how much of your preferences for music come down to how it sounds like production wise and sonically and stuff like that, mix wise, I'm wondering if you would like grunge more if you heard a modern iteration of it with more, current tech, and it just like sounded better overall, if it's like the very specific way that the music tends to sound, or if it's the production of it that turns you away from it. Because I know that you've mentioned how you almost overwhelmingly do not like 90s music because of the way that the drums sound 90% of the time. Yeah. And it's like, if they didn't, would that still be true?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. We'll find out, because I think you're right. Grunge is coming back, and it's going to be interesting to see, how people work that in, especially because one of the things that I hate when I say 90s music, I think of several things. One is grunge in general. The second thing I think of is Alanis Morissette, and and oh, how I hate the way that she sings.
I see.
In that, like, she had that like way.
Yeah.
I just cannot
It's like almost
stand
a
it.
yodel, but not quite.
Yeah, it's like she can sing beautifully, right? She can sing really pretty, but then there's like that that glottal switch in her throat where she switches it to sing like that, like whatever. I don't even know. I can't imitate it because it's so terrible. But I can only sing beautifully. But but like my point in bringing that up is like I've heard, for those my Spotify Wrapped, the thing that was most interesting was it said that I listened to 711 different artists this year. Now that is a very skewed number because sometimes I'll just say like, "Hey Google, put on whatever kind of music," and
sure.
she'll just play for like an hour. She'll just play like whatever 20 different things.
700, if they came on.
Yeah, and
That's still amazing.
I listened to all sorts of things, but in some of the albums that I tried to listen to, I mentioned it in a previous video where I was listening to a lot of female-fronted metal stuff, and I ran across some metal bands that were doing the female vocals were doing that same kind of thing that Alanis Morissette was doing in the 90s.
Interesting.
And I'm just like, the moment I heard it, I'm just like, like shut this off. But I did hear it like several times, and so that tells me that style is sort of coming back, or whatever. And so I'm curious to see. It's going to be curious to see, because we've talked about this a million times. The decades ebb and flow and come and go, and trends in music, whatever. And we've been in this like really shiny production era of music now for like well over a decade. And, we've been wondering, is it going to come back around where a more raw, emotional side is going to come back, and we're going to get a little bit more of the 90s influencing. And I think with this grunge thing, you're right. So I'm sorry.
I think we'll get a modern version of that, which because it's going to sound better. I think one of the big things about the grunge movement initially, that is one of the best things, the most appealing things about it, is how much of it was super, super accessible to just about anybody. Like grunge as a genre, as a movement, was, this super grassroots push up against how hyper-produced music had gotten, where it's like Kurt Cobain was homeless, and then at least at some point, and he became one of the biggest grunge bands of all time. And like, there's so much of that type of thing where it's like, you can now just take anybody who's making music, and the raw sound that comes with being underproduced, based on the fact that it's very expensive to have a well-produced album, was very popular. And so all kinds of people were able to make music and be famous with the stuff they were making simply because it wasn't overly polished. And I think that that's a really great thing that we lost when grunge went away. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that would come back now with the resurgence of like grunge 2.0, because that's not how things work anymore, unfortunately. But I do at least love to hear things that sound that way, because it's a cool, like, Deftones and Nirvana. And I mean, I love Alice in Chains. So much just stuff that came out of this area specifically, like, very cool sound. And you don't realize necessarily, at least I didn't, I guess, how grungy grunge actually sounds, because there's so little, not grungy like gross and unrefined, but just like how much it sounds like itself without any comparison to anything else. To be like, oh, it's like as a new Uematsu fan, the composer for Final Fantasy, like, I've listened to all of his Final Fantasy stuff over the years, and it's like, okay, well, this is, all stuff that I became familiar with as it pertains to this game series. But then I went and I listened to like 2 or 3 games that he made after he left Square, that he made for Mistwalker, which is like an Xbox studio, or at the time was, and I have never played. And I listened to them and I was like, oh, this is just what Uematsu sounds like. Like, it was so much easier to pinpoint what his style was when I had no context to put
out of the Final Fantasy context. Yeah.
Yes. And so that's kind of what I'm starting to pick up with this grunge thing now with Royal and the Serpent and Bad Flower, is like, this is a type of music that went away, and it's coming back, and it sounds like it is a type, the same way that metalcore sounds like a thing, and jazz sounds like a thing. Like it means more than just cheaply made or at least inexpensively made rock music. It means, okay, these types of progressions and this type of guitar tone and stuff like that, which is really cool.
So is that how Pierce the Veil's new album sounds?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds really good. Production quality is great, but it has a lot of the bits and pieces of what makes grunge sound like grunge as a genre.
Now, not knowing anything about Pierce the Veil, but I've like seen their logo over the years. I'm sure I've heard one of their two of their songs on one of those compilations I was talking about earlier. I think of them as being more of a screaming band rather than a singing band.
Same.
Is that true on this grungy album, though?
It's not. I don't think it's as true on this album. No, it's not gone, but they do more singing. It is a bit of a departure from what I think you would expect to hear from them, for sure.
Okay, so that's cool. That can be really neat then.
It is. It's very
I like
cool.
it when a band does that and decides to just do something different.
I was going to bring up Honkin' with Bobo by Aerosmith.
I don't know what that is, but okay.
They did a blues album.
See, now to me, that sounds awesome.
Right, and I don't necessarily... It's one of my favorite joke albums to bring up because it's niche and it has a stupid name. And
It does.
It doesn't...
Honkin' with
and it's
Bobo?
Like, yeah, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever for something to be made by Aerosmith, so it's just like rife. It's really ripe for using as a joke thing. But
It's got
like,
that joke.
My mom...
Yeah.
I don't know how many... I haven't really listened to it ever, but it's probably not terrible. It's just like, what a shift.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so does that mean we're on to my number 8? Oh my God, we need to... Well, I guess we only got 2 to go. Okay, so my number 8 is very surprising to me. And for those of you who are watching this and are fans of this band, you might be like, oh, that's very surprising that Patrick has this band on their list.
I'm so excited.
My number 8 is ID Entity, the deluxe edition by the band Riverside. So, Chris, do you know who Riverside is?
I do not.
Okay, they are
And why is it not Identity?
It's ID Entity.
Okay.
It's
their
the
fault,
whole
I guess.
thing. It's ID comma or colon entity.
Oh, wow. Is this a Japanese band?
No. Oh, no. Riverside is one of the predominant, very famous prog rock / prog metal bands. Like, they are up there with Dream Theater, I would say.
Oh.
Like Dream Theater is like the...
Dream Theater's flagship. The
Dream
most
Theater's like
accessible prog
aliens
metal.
fly across, they see... Dream Theater's like aliens fly across, they look down, they see Dream Theater. Like, just like a few levels below that is Riverside. Like, they have been a prog rock, prog metal band for ages. They are very well respected. They are a huge band. I found out, I think their first album came out in 2004 or 2007, which really shocked me. I think 2004, which really shocked me because I can remember being back in the days of Napster and downloading a song of theirs because I heard it on TV at my grandma's house when I would turn it to the like rock TV station where it would play like random rock songs, just like as a radio station, not like a music video thing or anything like that. There was just like a series of like in the 800s of whatever.
Oh yeah,
network.
the music TV channels that.
Yeah, there was music TV channels, and I would always go to like the metal one, or the like rock, indie rock or whatever.
Yeah.
And I heard a Riverside song, and it had like the coolest drum sound in it, and I was like, I love this drum sound. It's a cool like distorted drum pattern. And I loved it, and I looked it up, and I downloaded the song, and I never thought about Riverside ever again for the last 20 years. Now, I've been aware of them as a band. I didn't really know anything about them. And I saw they had a new album coming out this year. And so when it came out, I checked it out, and I really very much regret not doing an album reaction for this,
Oh boy.
or a reaction for this album, just because it like is shockingly amazing.
Wow.
Like, it is exactly what I think of as prog. It's so hard. I keep saying like prog rock / prog metal because I think to me, I've always just thought of it at all as like prog metal. But I'm definitely learning now that there is a difference between prog rock and prog metal because like Pink Floyd is not in the same genre as this band.
No.
I guess maybe they would be, but I've only heard the one Pink Floyd album. But this
it doesn't really change much.
I definitely feel like I don't know that much about Tool, but I definitely feel like are moments on this album that feel Tool-esque. So
I think that a really long conversation could be had about whether or not Tool is prog rock or prog metal.
Well, to me, I would lean towards metal, but that's not knowing anything. But
I agree with that, but I think that they are so many aspects of what can generally make something metal or not are not present in Tool, and plenty of them also are.
But just think about Pink Floyd, right? Definitively not prog metal.
1,000% not correct.
But then when you look at like how could Tool and Pink Floyd be in the same genre? Like they can't, right? So
right.
It has to be prog metal.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. And again, we're going to do Tool in the future on this channel. I'm very excited about it. But this band, the synths, amazing. Like really cool. I think this album was recorded as a 3-piece, but there's a 4th member of the band that joined them, I think, that tours with them. But the lead singer has a really nice voice. It's very smooth. He has a tiny bit of a British accent. This band is from England. They have been around forever. Like I said, they're very well respected. They had one of the core members of their band passed away, I think back in 2017 or something. And they released an album that's kind of like a Western album. That was their last album, or it's like Old West themed. I've tried listening to it. I didn't really make it all the way through, but I did a little bit of research on this band after I fell in love with this album. But not knowing anything about this album, I put it on for the first time, and the first thing you hear is synths. Awesome synths, sounds like an 80s song. Then these drums come in and it sounds happy. And eventually the song morphs into what you think of as prog rock, right? Like just bass doing very complex things, which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, but is just the sound of prog music. Mm-hmm. And then this really cool, somewhat simple, but probably much more complex than I can perceive, drum beat. And then just some like rhythmic guitar parts. It just the songs morph into what you think of, I guess, as stereotypical prog music. But I love his voice the whole time. I really like everything I'm hearing. The song structuring is different than I would expect. However, it's primarily the song structuring that I enjoy with just long sections, right? So there's always a clearly defined chorus in every one of their songs. And that stays true on this album. And the chorus is always done at least twice, if not 3 times. The song lengths are all over the place, but they have like a 13-minute song. They have whatever. So this album is I'm talking about the deluxe edition. Okay, so this is kind of a confusing thing here. The deluxe edition has 11 tracks at 83 minutes.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah, proggy. That's a lot, man.
However, the standard edition of this only has 7 tracks, and it's still 53 minutes long.
There it is.
So the thing about it is, the deluxe edition has the 7 tracks that are on the standard edition, plus 2 instrumental songs, one of which is 11 minutes and one of which is 6 minutes. So you can do math or whatever there. So yeah, I guess it'd be 72 minutes. And then there's 2 bonus songs, which are like radio edit versions of the 2 singles from the album. So I don't really count those as songs because they're just shortened versions of two of the 7 songs from the standard edition. Okay. So when I say deluxe edition, there's 7 songs that are 53 minutes long that are I think the shortest song is like 5 minutes something. So they're all really long songs. They all have really great structuring. I really like the lyrics on this. The whole package is really great. And then there's 2 bonus songs that are just sort of instrumental songs. And I can kind of take or leave the instrumental songs. They're not a big reason why I like this at all. Mm-hmm. They're interesting to listen to, but as you know from all of our Metallica videos, instrumental songs are not what's going to sell me on an album. So
Never.
So this album's a little confusing in terms of like what deluxe edition is and whatnot, but I'm just talking about the 7 core songs. They're all great. Like I said, I mentioned, I really like the lyrics on this album, It's not something I bring up very often, but I really do like the lyrics. A majority of this album is about just kind of being frustrated with the digital age we live in and society, the things that are very frustrating about it in general. A lot of it is about the media and society trying to like tell you who you're supposed to be and like boxes you're supposed to fit into. And a lot of the lyrics are just about like, no, like why? Stop it. Stop doing this. Stop trying to pigeonhole people. Stop trying to box people in.
Awesome.
Stop trying to be something that you're not supposed to be. Stop telling every child that they're a winner no matter what. Stop giving like prizes to everybody that enters the race. Things like that I really like a lot. I like the lyrics on this album a lot. And so, like I said, I just have to mention that because normally lyrics, people on the channel will know lyrics are not something that ever stand out to me. So, my number, I think we're on number 8. My number 8, a very big surprise to me, probably the most surprising album on the whole year to me, because I've been aware of this band for many, many years, and I've never looked into them, never got into them. I've always considered them to be like Dream Theater, beyond the realm of music that I could comprehend enough to enjoy. And I was completely wrong. Completely wrong. I cannot wait to show you one of the songs off of this album because you're going to listen to the first 2 minutes of it and be like, this is incredible. And then the song starts after that. And you get to hear a full awesome song that incorporates all of those elements you already heard in the first 2 minutes, just with like prog rock sound. So very, 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 very much like this album, and I could recommend it to anybody. It's fantastic.
That's awesome.
So that is Identity by Riverside.
I think you could probably just call it Identity, even though it's not written that way. But
I think the fact that it's based on what all the lyrics and what all the like songs are about, I think the fact that it's Identity is definitely a specific point.
Okay, cool.
I think. All right, so we are on to your number 7, I believe.
Number 7. This is a band that used to be a band and then became a guy.
Okay. Alice Cooper.
In the same way that the Annex used to be a band that became a guy.
Did you know that Alice Cooper was the name of a band and then the guy... No, there is no... Did you know that? Alice Cooper used to be a band in the 70s, and then one of the members of the band broke away, named himself Alice Cooper, and became Alice Cooper.
That's got to be a nightmare.
Yeah, go listen to any that like Alice Cooper in this like 60s or 70s is like a Americana rock band, and then he just totally morphed into what Alice Cooper became.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Or like the Annex you said.
It's weird because it's almost the same thing, but it's just different because this guy's name isn't. I mean, I guess it is sort of. It's his middle name, but yeah, I guess the Annex. His name isn't the Annex.
Right.
And I mean, Alice Cooper's name isn't that either, but that's a name.
Right.
That's a name.
Yeah, that makes it even weirder. So
that's funny. Okay. This is a band. They haven't put out an album in a while. I think the last album might have been like 2018.
Okay. Quite a while.
This is a band named Dayshell.
Dayshell. Okay, I've never heard of it at all. No clue.
And it is definitely in the vein of all of the other stuff. It's interesting actually because it's heavier. This is Dayshell. The album is called Pegasus. It's a 10-song album for 40 minutes.
Okay.
Another U.S. album. And it was a band, and then it stopped being, and now it's just the guy. And the interesting thing about that, when I said it's not his name, is because whose name is Dayshell? That's a ridiculous name.
Were you familiar with Dayshell when they were a band?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember hearing not their first album, I guess, but like their 2013 album, and I think the one from 2018 as well.
Okay.
But the lead singer-songwriter's name is Shaylee Dayshell Bourget, or Bourget maybe, or maybe Bourget. Somebody help me out. But Dayshell is such a crazy middle name for a person to have. And yeah, it's interesting because Coheed and Cambria is a band that I really wish I liked. I've tried so hard.
Yeah.
And the music rules. The music rules, and there's just something about the lead vocals that I do not care for. And I want to, because Coheed rules.
Yep.
But I can't listen to it. And this reminds me of Coheed, but not enough to be unenjoyable.
Okay, that's interesting.
But it is very much like if you're looking to figure out what kind of music you would get from Dayshell, I think Coheed and Cambria is a fantastic analog for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, a new Dayshell album. Oh my God, it's been how long? Like, and I think a lot of that had to do with the turnover and all the stuff from the band and just like transitioning into being a solo project. But
it still sounds like the same band?
It's not different enough where I was like, oh, this is different now. And this is another band that I don't have a ton of history with and did not appropriately prepare for this thing that we're doing right now. And so I feel like I struggle to know what to say, but it was an album to be excited about when I saw that it had happened. And I don't know, it does fall very similar to the Annex. Aside from just being a solo project that used to not be, the Annex is great, but the biggest complaint I have about the Annex is that every song is the same. Mm-hmm. Like, really, very much so.
Yes.
This doesn't have that problem, but there is a sensation that you get that where you're like, I can feel the lack of different ideas.
Okay.
Because when you're a solo artist like that and you're doing all of the instruments and everything else yourself, programming, whatever you want to call it, you're not getting input from people who aren't you.
That's
and
true.
I mean,
That's
maybe if you're a producer and stuff, but you know, from a songwriting perspective, and I think that might be one of the reasons why the Annex has a problem with everything sounding so similar, is because it's just one guy writing his own music.
Yeah.
And this kind of feels a little bit like, yeah, I can tell that there's just one dude doing it. But it's interesting. It's fun. It sounds great. It's catchy. It's heavy when it needs to be. And it does a little bit of genre switching within the album itself. So, number 7.
Well, it's interesting. It's just interesting because sometimes when a solo, now in this case, I feel like it's different because he kept the name of the band for himself. So there's like there's a expectation that would come along with that. But usually I find myself getting really excited for a solo album from a lead singer because or any other member of a band, but generally lead singer, because it's like, okay, the shackles of the band are off and I can do whatever I want. Like, I think of my favorite example of that is Brandon Flowers' solo album, because I have tried to and never been able to get into the Killers.
Interesting.
But Brandon Flowers' second solo album is just from front to back phenomenal. It is really so cool. There's like throwback 50s. There's cool Sorry, I keep popping the microphone. I'll probably EQ all that out anyway, so no one will notice. But there's just so many cool things to it, and I would never think that because I don't enjoy the Killers, at least as much as I would like to. And so with something like this, I almost feel like he kind of like he did kind of limit himself a little bit by keeping the name of the band the same. However, if the name of the band had, if you have like, I don't want to just say fans, but like if you have a fan base, you want to be able to use that as much as possible, and especially if the guy's trying to make the same sort of style of music, like it makes sense. But I don't know. When you said it was like a solo project, I was like, oh, to me that means freedom, whereas the way you described it is not what happened, I guess.
That's interesting. And I mean, I'm willing to be wrong about this. Like, I did not go to their previous albums and then, B back and forth. And like, I don't know them inside out well enough to be able to make a claim that it is exactly the same. But there wasn't anything about it where I heard it and like, is this the same band? Is this, because sometimes I've seen situations where, like one of the most painful situations of this regard of the story I'm about to tell was every once in a while, YouTube Music will get confused about where a song goes. And so it's like, a new song from Firewater. Hold on. Firewater hasn't put out music since 2012.
Right.
And they're one of my favorite bands of all time. And you can't just new music from Firewater and you go listen to it and it's like some Spanish thing that's not even, it's not the same band. It's not the same people. It's nothing. It's just so weird, misplaced. And it's like, you can't hurt me like this. And so it's not that kind of difference where you're like, is this even the same band? Did I lose my mind? Like, it's definitely within the same vein. And that from a nuanced perspective, I just don't have the details to be able to say how it compares to their older stuff. But it's an interesting point for sure. Because I was going to say, whenever I see any band member of a band that I like going solo, I'm like, oh, this probably isn't going to be any good.
Oh, that's interesting. I just have this total opposite reaction, which is funny.
Because I feel like it is the constraints of everybody in the band putting in the parts of that, it's because it's like, oh, I've decided that I'm going to only make this cake with flour, and it's like, well, I don't like what I don't think you should do that, but I don't really have a ton of examples to pull from. The one that sticks out to me is all of, at least when the lead guitarist for People in Planes went solo, and I've heard some of his stuff, and it's like, I can see the parts of their songs as a band that are coming from the stuff that he's making by himself. Like it really helps you isolate the ingredients brought in by individual people. Mm-hmm. Like Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant used to write TV shows together all the time. And then when they went separate and like Gervais wrote a show and Merchant wrote a show and they had like their solo projects, it was so interesting to be like, oh, now you can see exactly who's bringing what jokes to their collaboration projects. And I just did not care for Pete What's-His-Face's music half as much, even a third as much as People in Planes. Like they were such a great sum of the parts, some of the parts that they are as the band. Yeah. And so that's why like solo projects make me like kind of worried. I would not ever be excited, I don't think.
But at the same time though, I mean, we talked about this a little bit in this moment video, like I think what needs to happen more than anything is a Maria Brink solo album. Right. Where she wouldn't have to be in this moment anymore. She could just make pop music if she wanted to, or make heavy music if she wanted to. Like, I'm not sure what aspect of that band is holding what back. But like, to me, the thing that should happen there is that is what happens. Like,
I think, the big difference there, honestly, is like, what position is this band in before that solo split happened?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Because People in Planes crushing it. Those two albums are fire, and they were only just going to keep making fire, and then they quit. And it's like, well, this thing that's one of my favorite bands, one of the most foundational couple of albums in my life, it's like if they're splitting up, whatever's coming out of this won't be as good. But if it's something like in this moment where it's like they're really getting stale, we need to mix things up for this band a little bit, I could totally see that making like, oh, she has a solo project? Let's see what that's like, because there's got to be a reason that they have it. Just there's so little heart left. Like as far as that recent album is concerned, like it was just so by the numbers.
Right. I don't know. I don't know. To me, the idea of a solo album is exciting because you can do different genres of music if you want.
And I think there's plenty of merit to that. I think that this is definitely not an either or situation.
Yeah, for sure. It's just interesting when we approach it differently because I would get excited and you would be like, ooh, I don't know about this, but we'll wait and see. All right, so that means we are on to my number 7.
Yes.
And my number 7 is Truth Killer by Seven Dust.
Oh.
Didn't do that on purpose. Just realized that now. Number 7. So this is 12 tracks, 49 minutes. This is the band's 14th studio album since their debut in 1997, which was 26 years ago.
Crazy.
I have all 14 of their albums. I greatly enjoy all 14 of their albums. I can very definitively say this is their best album.
Woo! Claim. Big claim.
Well, no. Yeah, I can say that. Yeah, I can say that. I think this album shocked me so much. I have a reaction to this up on my channel if you want to hear more thoughts on this. But Chris, you and I reacted to the single from this album, and I was really disheartened. I was like, ooh, this is way overcompressed, and I do not like it. And then I got the album, I listened to it, I did the reaction to it, and I was shocked. The mixing is so much better. I did show a song of this to Chris Schoenberg. He listened to it on his own, and he did still think it sounded way over compressed. And I guess I get it, but like I'm just used to the sound of Seven Dust, which they've had very bad sounding albums in the past in terms of being over compressed, like to the point where I can't even listen to one of their albums. It's so bad. But then they have other albums that I think sound really great. This album sounds really great, is not over compressed in my opinion, except for the last song on the album, which is that song we reacted to, which is called Fence. This album is so surprising in so many ways. There was so much more effort and work put into this album than I thought. For some reason, I thought this album was just going to be kind of like another album that the band squirted out and then went on tour for. I was wrong. This album has a lot of really cool parts to it. The melodies are some of the best melodies they've ever had as a band. Lejean's vocals are, I think, maybe the best vocals he's ever had their whole career. He's absolutely phenomenal. There's, I think, the heaviest moments that this band has ever had is on this album. But then also maybe some of the whole first track on this album is this awesome electronic beat that kind of, it's a very down tempo sort of chill song. And it's like 100% electronic until the last, like, I think it's like a 4.5 minute song. And the last like 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, the band comes in and it's a band. But before that, it's a full electronic song with just Lejean singing over it. And it was so surprising to hear that album start that way. I didn't know what to expect. And then there's super heavy moments. Again, I cannot stress enough, like, to me, I love Seven Dust as a whole, but they have whole like runs in their career where they would write like a whole album or two where there's only like maybe one or two catchy songs on a whole album. This whole album, every song is easy to remember, catchy, you can sing along with it. It's heavy, like so heavy, I can't stress that enough. This album is so heavy. But at the same time, the choruses are soaring. There's so many layers. There's more keyboards on this album than any of their previous albums. Normally, with the Seven Dust album, some of the songs will start with these cool like synth pads and layering that creates this kind of atmosphere. And one of the things they've been surprising that they've done is they'll have like a minute of atmospheric stuff and then a song will start, which is a long time to like mess around with like atmospherics.
Oh yeah.
But then once the song starts, it's just Seven Dust. It's just kick, bass, drums, vocals. And then maybe they'll throw in a few things here and there. And then they're really good with, they have like 4 members of the band that all can sing. And they do sometimes sing lead, all members of the band, which is great. So when they're doing harmonies and gang vocals, there's just layering up the wazoo because everybody can sing in the band. It's phenomenal. And this album, though, there's keyboards throughout the verses, the choruses. There's really cool little bleepy bloopies. There's extra hi-hats. There's additional like drum patterns and drum beats and all sorts of electronic things. And the whole thing is just the best package Seven Dust has ever released. And like I said, 26 years or whatever into their career, this is their 14th album. It's phenomenal from front to back, minus the last song, which is the worst song on the album. So my number 7, I have no problem saying this could have been higher on my list, but we're starting to get into all the really good stuff.
Yeah.
And this is, to me, where actually, everything's been pretty good on my list so far. But yeah, my number 7, Truth Killer by Seven Dust.
If somebody was like, I've never listened to Seven Dust, what album should I start with? Would you pick this one?
That is such a hard question. Because the music that made them famous isn't really very much like the music that they're making now.
Oh, interesting.
It kind of is, but it's really interesting because Seven Dust is considered a nu metal band, like a nu metal band. And I get that. I do not like the term nu metal because when you say new metal, what I think of is Slipknot and Korn.
Right.
And
Limp Bizkit, everything from 2001, 2003.
See, I don't even think of Limp Bizkit, but yeah, I guess.
I thought Limp Bizkit was one of the pioneers of new metal as a genre.
I guess to me,
Slipknot, Korn,
Limp Bizkit is
Limp
rap
Bizkit,
something,
Godsmack.
rap metal to me.
Yeah,
but like
Godsmack, I think might be a better example of new
yeah,
metal.
but Godsmack to me is
form.
like that's like borderline rock music, right? Like they're so
yeah, but I
like,
mean, when
are
new
they
metal
heavy enough to be metal? But is new metal metal? I know we don't need to get into this now,
right? Because
But-
I was thinking like, and this is kind of a silly thing to say, but like new metal circa 2001 is not as heavy as metal now.
No. But at the same time, there was still In Flames and stuff in 2001. You know what I mean? So like,
right.
it's always been heavy. It just wasn't the metal that was in the mainstream. But new metal was the mainstream.
Yes.
You know, like when we were in high school, you heard Godsmack, Seven Dust on the radio, like
Constantly,
top 40
in a way that you never would have.
Correct. Before that ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that there are any heavy songs like that in mainstream radio now. You know, maybe Shine Down when they release a song or something like that.
Point.
But, you know,
I mean,
I don't know if, and the thing is like new metal is coming back. In the next 2 years, new metal is going to be the thing. I've seen all sorts of signs of it. And so what's cool about that is to have a band like Seven Dust, who really hasn't deviated their sound that much since the beginnings of what new metal was. Mm-hmm. It's tough because if you just said, like your question is kind of throwing me off because like I said, like they have an album that is clearly they're like, okay, we're on a big record label. We're going to make an album that is like more accessible. So they do have, and that's the first album of theirs I bought, and I loved that album, and that's the album that caused me to fall in love with them. So I would almost hesitate to say that album. That album doesn't even come close to reaching how heavy this new album is. But I think Seven Dust is better when they're a more heavy band.
yeah.
And it's interesting to say that because they have long stretches of their career where they were heavy in a certain way, but then every song came back to this very nice, soaring sung chorus. And Seven Dust has almost never been a band where they have harsh vocals, really ever. Like almost never, their whole career. The most harsh vocals they've ever done are definitely on this Truth Killer album.
Cool.
And they're not even that crazy. Like I would say there's like no screaming part in any Seven Dust song ever, really. Morgan Rose, the drummer for Seven Dust, he has sung lead parts on every single one of their albums, and every time he sings, it's kind of like a screamy part, always. And it's always kind of like a background part. If you heard any Seven Dust song, you would definitely know what I'm talking about. He's in like almost every Seven Dust song. But when the lead singer, LaJean Witherspoon, sings, it's pretty much always 100% of the time singing.
Yeah.
He does have a bit more of like a we're going to be intense voice, but he pretty much very rarely uses that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's an interesting question. Mm-hmm. And in some ways they have been so consistent throughout their career. I say this is like their best album, but the reasons I'm saying it's their best album are like small reasons because I'm familiar enough with them to know the like tiny deviations they have here. Mm-hmm. That's what makes it special rather than this being like if you just listen to every one of their albums, I don't know if you would think this is clearly their best one.
Okay.
But having listened to their whole catalog and studied them multiple times over the years, like going back, listening to all of it from the beginning to the front, to me, this is definitively their best work. So
Awesome.
yeah. All right. So on to your number 7.
Number 7. And
The last album we're talking about in this video. So make it a good one.
I've got plenty to say. Plenty to say.
Can I guess what it is?
Yes.
No, I don't want to guess. No, you just tell me.
Why? Because then I'd be like,
Because I don't want to guess wrong and then have you like have it later on.
oh,
Because I think I know one of the albums that's going to be on your list, and it's going to be something we can talk about.
well, we'll see. This is Portals, which I upgraded to the deluxe version because of what you said earlier about your deluxe version. but I haven't listened to the extra songs on this.
Okay. Even if they're stinkers, it's extra songs.
Yeah.
So.
This is Portals by Melanie Martinez.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what you meant when you said Portals, but okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And it is, with the deluxe edition, it's 16 songs, over an hour and 3 minutes.
Okay.
This album, I was looking around online yesterday at some reviews and stuff just to kind of see if I could figure out what it is about this album that keeps causing it to fall short compared to the previous two albums, because Crybaby is a phenomenal album. It is, I think, flawless. It is definitely a perfect album, and it is an incredible debut album, and it is just really fantastic overall. K through 12 is good. It is also, I would say, a perfect album, going off of the usual criteria of
don't have to skip
skippable songs. I find that the first song on any album has to work extra hard because it's the first song and it's the one you're going to hear the most.
Okay. I would agree with that.
So I give the first song here. It's like People in Plains, the first album, has Barracuda as their first track. I don't really love that song, but I give it a pass because I know how hard it has to work as the first song, that I'm not going to consider it skippable, or at the very least remove it from my perfect albums playlist because of that. And K through 12 kind of has that problem a little bit too, but it gets a pass. But overwhelmingly, her career, 2 albums before, they're both concept albums based on a character that she created called Crybaby. And my favorite thing about what she does is that she takes concepts that on the surface are very infantile and just really superficial, and she constructs all of the lyrics in the music to basically be really dark metaphorical subversions of the things she's talking about, but she's using the lyrics to sort of, represent a different thing.
Okay.
So it's like there's one song that she has from the first album called Tag You're It, which is about having basically some guy stalk her character at the very least, or a woman in general, and like wrestle her down, and like just there's a lot of violence implied in the song, but it's lyrically structured to sound like she's just singing about a game of tag. And I really, really love the way that she does that. It's my favorite thing about her music, other than how it sounds, which is super cool anyway. But it's like that barely hidden darkness underneath the stuff that she's talking about, where it's like, this portrayal of like a perfect family, but then you like get inside the house and it's this really dark, bleak, abusive, terrible place, and everybody's sad and awful. And the first 2 albums start off with the crybaby character as a young child, and then the second album is basically that same character into high school, and it plays around a lot with the evolving of the level of issues that this character would experience throughout life in that time period. And then some stuff that's a little bit more just like broadly subversive, like songs about being a woman in the industry, and the way that, the differences between how men and women are treated in terms of how, like, if men are especially aggressive towards women, then they blame them, like, oh, well, she shouldn't wear stuff like that in the first place. She doesn't want to deal with this. It's like, that's not how this works. That's not how this is supposed to work. And it's all dressed up in these seemingly wholesome or otherwise non-controversial layers of paint. And it's so fantastic what she does. But I have always wondered, how long can this go on? in terms of this character that she's made and the progression of that character through all of the different events of life. Like what, before this album came out, it's like, what is the theoretical third album in the Melanie Martinez discography? What does Crybaby do now? Does she go into college? Is she part of real life and the job world? Is there enough difference between what the concepts of album 2 and whatever would come out with album 3 that would cause it to be worthwhile and all kinds of stuff? And second album also, she put out a movie that went in conjunction with the album, which ended up, it was really just like a concept. It was like if you could make a music video that ran the span of a concept album and had its own form of that. So like it's a movie where every song a music video for every song exists, and then there's like a little thread that is used to stitch it together in a story form so that it works as a movie.
Okay.
But it is overwhelmingly just 12 music videos. And it's great. I saw it in the theater on a one-night showing. It was really interesting. But it's like, okay, now what? And I did not realize that she did a 2-year hiatus, because that album came out in September of 2019. And it was one of the last, I think it was the last thing that I saw in a theater before COVID hit. And then it was nothing until this April or March maybe. And so it was like, okay, well, good. She finally put out a new album. It's been 4 years, but that's not an outrageous amount of time. Plenty of bands take that long to do music. So I didn't even realize that she had a 2-year hiatus involved in the middle of that. And so Portals is effectively, it is supposed to be a death and rebirth sort of reinvention of her character and her style and everything that she's doing. Like the beginning of the music video of the first song is a headstone that says like, "Here lies Crybaby." And it's effectively to say that character and all of the things that she does are dead. And this is what we are now. And then she, is reborn into some kind of very odd pink fairy thing with a weird face and 4 eyes. And
that's what's on the cover of the album.
Yeah. And that's like this new persona, this new post Crybaby persona that she is putting together. And I don't really get it. And it's not, I don't know if it's to be gotten. I think that it is much more of an ethereal concept. Something that is maybe more symbolic or otherwise not particularly tied to anything. Like Crybaby and K-12 are so grounded in reality that to follow it as a concept album, a couple of concept albums, works really well in its favor. And so I was going through and looking at some reviews of this album to see if I could get just what are some other people thinking about it. And I saw one that said that he gave it a 6 out of 10, which I think is a little low, but it was effectively like this album for trying to present itself as a rebirth or like a reinvention album has too many things that sound like her older music. And that kind of sticks because some of the complaints or otherwise notes that I had made about it list, because this is the first album on this list that I have listened to many times. And I've been trying to figure out how to like it, and 2, trying to figure out why I don't.
Sure.
And one of the most interesting things that she does to me is how she's got songs that, and it's so thematically appropriate. She's got a song about basically like being a marionette, and like all of the percussive elements of the song are stuff that are tied to like wood and clinking, and it's very thematically appropriate. And she's got a song on K-12 that's about health in some capacity, but it's presented as going to the nurse's office, and like an overwhelming majority of the elements within that song are like coughing and sneezing and just different, like using samples of otherwise things that are not musical and using them as percussive elements to drive the song is so interesting. And it's so well done in the different elements that she's used it in the past. But she only has one song like that on this album, and it feels too much like, oh, this is just the same thing you did before. So it's like everything that sounds like her old music sounds a little bit too much like it from the perspective of like, there's not a ton of evolution of what you've done here. And the stuff that doesn't quite sound like what she's done in the past is missing, somewhat unfairly, I think to say, the stuff that makes all of her old stuff so interesting.
I still have literally no clue what Melanie Martinez sounds like. You could be talking about rap music to me, for all I know. This could be a hardcore metal band. This could be mariachi music. This could be pop music, which I assume it is because you can go buy her vinyl at Target. This could be literally country. This could be anything. I have no clue. And I love that you've done this to me before. You have talked to me for hours at this point about this person, and I have no clue what her music sounds like, and I love that. I absolutely love it.
I'm glad that you love it. She fits into a vein of like, Ellie Goulding has sounded like her. There's some lights in some of her stuff. There was something we were listening to recently that I was just like, this is Melanie Martinez all over it.
Was it the Poppy?
Poppy's got a lot of Melanie Martinez in it. Aviva's in there too. Like it's very much in that vein.
Does she have guitars in her music?
Not really.
Okay.
She does in some of her newer stuff, like acoustic guitars.
That's all right. That just kind of tells me a little bit of what I could expect. Though I know it's so funny. For people who don't know, like Chris has tried to get me to react to Melanie Martinez so many times. We've talked about it this whole year pretty much. And we just never really got around to it because there's always another dumb Metallica album to react to. But, hopefully we'll get to do that at some point. For sure.
I can't decide if I want you to react to an album or a song.
Right. And maybe we'll do that first or just start with it or something. Or you could show me one song from each of her albums and just see.
That's not a bad idea. That
just sounds see what we think.
Hard.
And you could tell me you don't tell me which song is from which.
Oh,
and then I'd have to be like, okay, this sounds like the more modern one or whatever. I don't know.
Okay, so. I dig that idea a lot. Yeah, let's do that because then you're focusing on a different thing.
So tell me why this album still, even with all of because you just explained to me basically why you liked her first two albums so much and what kind of disappoints you about this one, but it's still your number 7.
Right, because it is still good. There is good in it for sure. It is not without merit. The thing that bothers me the most about it is that it feels so much more disjointed from itself than the previous albums do. Like because of whatever the new thing is, it's so weird and lacks definition conceptually to me. It's like, what is the theme that I'm following through this album? What is happening in this? Like there's a couple of songs that I think are like, this is, or at least one song maybe, I don't know, where it's like, this is kind of annoying. And then there's like one song in there that starts off as a song and then there's a little break and then it turns into a completely different song. And I didn't realize that until I was listening to it yesterday. And I was like, I remember when this starts, I was like, this is in the middle of the same song? That's weird. Like it just does a lot of weird stuff. And so it's not ripping with bangers. Like those first two albums are so good. And this one is just, it feels a little lost. I'm lost in it. And I don't know. It keeps me from getting to the end. Like Crybaby's huge too. It's like 16 songs or something. But it's like, it's one of those ones where you get to the end and you're like, man, I wish this was longer. And this one is like,
a slog to get
all right,
through.
I've got a few songs left. All right, I'll get through it. And it's like, it's not bad, but it just doesn't, you have to put more effort into finishing it because it's like someone telling you a story about people you've never heard of and they don't set anything up. And so it's like when someone tells you a dream that they had. Like nobody cares about any dream anyone has ever had because it's like that that is interesting to me as the dreamer, and you are doing your job as a friend to listen to me talk about it.
Right.
But it couldn't mean less to you. And it feels a little bit like that, where it's like, what is my investment in what I'm hearing? Because I don't have anything to follow now. Like, it just, so much of it is.
Do you think, let me ask this. Do you think when she releases her next album, could she do something in such a way that it would make you go back and listen to this album differently?
Yeah. I don't know what it would be. I answered too quick there. I don't know what it would be. I don't know how she could release something with the limitations that come in the form of music in an album, that it's like,
I'm sure she's got like a live show that has all sorts of explanations and videos and things that go along with it. I mean, have you looked into all that stuff or?
None of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing.
That's fine. I'm just curious. I wonder.
And I have, I mean, even what the songs are about, like, I'm not good with lyrics.
Right. Neither of us are.
Right. And we're not. And yeah. And a
Which
lot
is
of the
why when
times,
we-
like, if I am listening to the lyrics, I'm still probably going to have to look them up and be like, what does this mean exactly?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I love about her first two albums, is I don't have to do that.
Right.
They're so complexly written, and it's so well structured to be this two things at once kind of thing, but you are never lost as to what the song is about.
Sure.
And it's more conceptual now. It's less direct, and I feel disconnected from it in a way that makes it not, because otherwise a Melmar album's going to be like, if either of those two albums came out this year, top 3 easy. Crybaby
Sure.
probably number 1, especially compared to everything else on this list. Like, that album changed my life. And
You have talked about Melanie Martinez a lot the last 4 years or so, I would say. 3-4 years. All right, well, there you go.
Yep.
That's our first 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 6, 9, 8, 7.
7.
Jeez, counting backward, hard. So yeah, we don't need to waste any more time. Not that we're wasting your time, but we don't need to take up a bunch more time with this. The reason we are deciding to separate this into 2 videos is because I don't want to have a 6-hour-long video. No one will watch that. Who do we think we are? Martin Scorsese? Or Snyder Cut, or whatever.
That'll
Snyder?
work. Yeah. I mean,
whatever.
The Irishman's like 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah. I did watch, you know what? I don't think I ever finished it. I watched, I think, a majority of it, and I don't know if I ever finished it. I liked what I saw, though, and I'm not a big, like, mafia movie dude. But anyway.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun doing this, but we're going to get into part 2. We're going to actually record it right now, so I think we're going to be pretty loopy by the end of that video. But we're going to take a break because I got to go eat something and whatever, just for like the next 10 minutes or whatever. But then we'll be back and we'll be recording part 2. And I'll probably try to get both of these edited so they can be released on the same day.
Cool.
But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Part 2 is going to be coming out soon, and make sure you watch that because that's when we're going to be going through, obviously, our 6 through 1. This is getting into the big bangers now. This is the stuff that we're really excited to talk about. Not that we want.
Have things to say, finally.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for watching, and we will definitely, you better show up for the next video.